3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to GrokTALK. We're happy to be here in the studio this week. A couple of guests. I don't have anything ready. You know what's weird? We're starting a little early today. Skip is calling Phil Kerpen right now. We're going to have him on to talk about death taxes. And we had to rush in and get everything all set up. And so we're a little bit behind schedule because not only do we have to set up, we're starting early. So we're going to bring Skip. We're going to bring Phil in right now and talk about that, and then we'll, once we're done with Phil, we'll go back to the regular thing. We'll talk about who's going to be on the program. And
hold on a second. Steve's going to bring you on right.
You ready? All right, outstanding. Okay, well, Phil Kerpen was on the show March 22nd of last year. We almost booked him pretty close to the same weekend a year later. I thought maybe this will become this crazy annual thing where we have Phil Kerpen on the program. But welcome to GrokTALK, sir.
Hey, great to be here. If I'd known, I would have tried to make it our official annual...
It's our special day.
We'll have some noisemakers next year.
All right, so Phil's a leading free market policy analyst, advocate in Washington. Prior to American Commitment, he was a principal policy and legislative strategist for Americans for Prosperity. Worked for the Free Enterprise Fund, Club for Growth, Cato Institute, and he's joining us today. Last time we had him on, we talked about Obamacare delays. This year we're talking about death taxes. And you recently had an article in, I don't remember where the article was. Was it on American Commitment?
It was syndicated.
Syndicated?
Okay. A number of places.
All right, excellent. Let me turn this music down so I can actually hear what's going on here. So we're talking about death tax repeal, and this is something that a lot of people support. Start out, explain basically, if people don't understand what the estate tax is, and then there's a lot of support for this, isn't there, repealing this thing?
Yeah, this is polls pretty much consistently over many decades now show this is the single most hated federal tax. And that's hard to do because people hate most of the federal taxes. But the idea that after you work hard, pay taxes your whole life, play by the rules, that when you die, there would be another layer of tax, a double tax on top of all that just for dying and trying to pass something on to the next generation. That really offends people. And, we've made a lot of progress on this tax. It used to be that the federal government could take 55% of everything above $1 million when you died. We've now got that down to 40% of everything above $5 million. And that higher exemption amount makes a big difference because a lot of family farms and businesses that are smaller, the exemption amount is enough to protect them. But you still have a major problem here with larger family businesses and farms that don't meet that exemption amount. And a lot of times the only way you can pay the tax is to sell off the business or to sell off part of your land or to liquidate capital. And so that has a very economically destructive effect. It's one of the most destructive taxes. It's probably the most destructive tax economically that we have in the code because all the other taxes tax income. This one taxes assets. It actually destroys the capital stock directly. And so it's a very destructive tax. Now, while we've made progress, a little bit of progress, increasing the exemption amount and decreasing the rate, we have not had a vote on repealing the death tax in the United States House of Representatives for nearly 10 years. The last vote was April 13, 2005. And a lot of people are surprised to learn that because this is one of these issues where pretty much every Republican running for the House campaigns on this every time. And then they go and they don't vote on it. And they haven't voted on it. In fact, more than half the current House of Representatives has never voted on this issue in their life because they came to Congress after that last vote. And so we've been pressing very hard to have a vote. To have a vote, let's pass this in the House. Let's try to pass it in the Senate. Let's not have any illusions here. I don't think we can break a Democratic filibuster in the Senate, and even if we did, we probably can't get President Obama to sign this. But we got to get back in the habit of having votes on it and talking about it and spotlighting the issue so that we can make it an issue for the presidential so we can finally get rid of this tax. And so we've got it out of the House Ways and Means Committee. It was a 22-10 vote. And we've been told that they're going to bring it to the floor this month. And just because sometimes leadership says that and it doesn't happen, we're urging people to write to their members and say, tell leadership to bring this to the floor for a vote. And we've got a little over 11,000 people who've done that through our website so far.
Is there any reason why they haven't had a vote? I mean, why? I mean, if it's so popular, why has it been so long?
You know, that's a really good question. First of all, Nancy Pelosi was in charge of the House for 6 of those 10 years, or 4, I guess. She came in 6 and lost in 10. So for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, basically 7, 8, 9, 10, Nancy Pelosi was in charge. So for 4 of those 10 years, it's easy to understand why. But for the other 6, when Republicans were in control, there really isn't a good reason. You know, my theory on this is they don't like the negative media that comes with doing this, because as much as the public wants to get rid of this tax, the editorial boards and the TV news talking heads, they go crazy. This is a giveaway to the rich. How dare you? The government needs the money more, and all this kind of thing. Yeah. And I've told them to embrace that, because every time the liberal editorial board calls you evil for loving rich people for not wanting to tax their stuff when they die, the public hears that, and they're with you. They're not with the liberals who are attacking you. And this is, there's a study that I mentioned in the column you've got in front of you. It was done by 2 Yale professors the last time we did a big push for repeal about 10 years ago. And they looked at the entire history of the public polling on this issue. They're very liberal professors at Yale. They looked at the entire history of the polling on this issue, and they saw every poll that's ever been done shows support for repeal at least at 60%, sometimes as high as 70 or 80%. And they really couldn't figure it out. They were like baffled that the public wants to get rid of a tax that most of whom will not pay it themselves directly. But what they don't understand, and unfortunately what I think some Republicans don't understand, is that the vast majority of Americans think this tax is morally wrong, that taxing people at death with an extra tax, people who played by the rules their whole life, is wrong, whether they're going to pay that tax themselves or not. Not to mention, I think a lot of people understand that if the family business or farm that they work for has to shut down or liquidate to pay this tax, then they could be out of work. And so it's not just the people who pay the tax who sort of suffer the consequences. And so I think it's a fear of negative press, unfortunately, even though the public is not on the side of the press on this issue.
Yeah, they'd like to play defense rather than offense and bring this to the table and say, let's talk about this. They just don't even bring it up. So they're stuck arguing over things like the recent the discrimination bill in Indiana rather than the death tax. So it's a shame that they don't have the, let's say, fortitude to step up to the plate and take a winning issue across the line.
Well, look, I think the House is going to do it this month. I certainly hope we're going to pressure them as much as possible to do it this month. 10 years, to go 10 years between House votes on an issue like this is just unbelievable. It really is. And by the way, we ought to have this vote more than once a decade, even if we do get it this month.
Okay, so one of the things you talk about in the article is jobs and job losses versus job creation with regard to death taxes. You want to explore that a little bit?
Yeah, there have been two recent econometric studies, one from the Tax Foundation, one from the Heritage Foundation. They both found that bringing a full repeal of the estate tax would create over 100,000 jobs. So this is, as I said, this is not just about the people who pay the tax directly. There's also an economic impact, and it also has a significant impact on the capital stock, and that's very important for economic growth. And so this is one of these taxes where the economic destructiveness is so high that if you repeal the tax, the estate tax brings in about $20 billion a year for the federal treasury. And that's why Democrats, we can't lose out on that money. Government needs that money. And I'm kind of thinking, I think that somebody ought to be able to leave their money to their kids, not the government. I think their kids deserve it more than politicians and bureaucrats. But put that aside for a second. $20 billion a year is nothing in a $4 trillion federal budget. It's a speck. You can't even see it. And moreover, the tax is so economically destructive that if you eliminate it, there are now multiple studies showing that the revenue gains that you'll get from other taxes, from the higher economic growth as a consequence of that, will more than offset the $20 billion losses. So this is actually a net revenue gainer for the federal government as well.
Well, from what I know about farms, Ma and Pa aren't the only people that run the farm. Everything that goes and comes to the farm goes by truck. The implements that a farm uses to operate cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for the equipment and the maintenance. They hire seasonal help. They have full-time help. It's a going concern that feeds the rest of the area around it. When you're in an agricultural area, if it isn't for farms, where else do you work?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, as I said, we have made a lot of progress on this issue, particularly, raising that exemption amount from $1 million to $5 million has helped a lot of farms avoid this tax. But still, a lot of farms still get assessed by the IRS at worth more than $5 million. And that's because, you have a lot of farms increasingly that are in areas where the land values are being driven through the roof because you've got suburban sprawl coming. And the IRS comes in and says, well, we're going to value this land as if you wanted to build a subdivision here, and it's worth $50 million, and now you owe this amount of tax. And for a family that just wants to keep farming, the only choice they have is to shut down and sell the land in order to pay that tax. And so it's not as bad as it used to be because of the higher exemption amount, but it's still pretty bad, and the tax still hits 4,000 to 5,000 farms a year in this country. I'd like that to be zero. And when Democrats say we've solved the problem because the exemption amount's higher, I kind of, I try to suppress laughter because, number one, they fought us on raising the exemption. They wanted to lower the exemption. President Obama's budget this year lowers the exemption from $5 to $3.5 million. So when the Democrats say, oh, well, the exemption's so high, so we don't need to get rid of the tax, like, no thanks to you guys. And the other thing is, nobody should be hit with a tax after paying taxes and playing by the rules their whole life just because someone in the family died. And so, the exemption amount, getting that up, was an important victory, but we still need to keep making the case.
Well, I have a curveball for you. If Obama has engineered reparations to black farmers, we spent billions of dollars paying reparations to black farmers. Is this some sort of method to get it back within a generation? Is that what he's doing? Kind of a humorous thing there.
I don't know. I think the dollar amounts involved in that are probably enough that most of those people are under the exemption amount. But, certainly some of the more successful ones do get hit by this. And this has been an issue historically that's had a lot of black support. That last House vote that we had on this 10 years ago, 40 Democrats voted for it, and I think 12 of them were members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Ooh.
And this time around, the Democratic co-sponsor of the House bill, the prime sponsor is a Republican from Texas, Kevin Brady. The Democratic co-sponsor is a black Democrat from Georgia, Sanford Bishop. And so this is certainly an issue where, the successful black family businesses and farms get hit by this. And, when you're coming at, I'm not big on the sort of the historical injustices and that kind of thing. But, to the extent that people look at that kind of stuff, it really does hurt minorities and especially blacks that haven't had many generations to build up wealth, that are coming out of slavery and then coming out of Jim Crow. They might have only had a generation or two to try to build something for their family, and then the death tax snaps it back. So it actually does hit them disproportionately hard for that reason.
The Democrats want to maintain Uncle Sam's plantation. They don't want them to own their own. That's probably the least racially most offensive way of saying it. I'm quite convinced that Democrats are not on the side of minorities.
Well, they want to harvest them for votes. That's for certain. But look, it'll be very interesting. I think the partisan environment has become much sharper in the past decade, and so I don't think we're going to see 40 Democrats vote for it again this time as we did in 2005. I think it'll be a much smaller number, but it'll be a very interesting vote to look at and to see which Democrats voted for repeal 10 years ago and are against it now, and to see if we can't make that a political issue for them.
So you mentioned possibly having it be filibustered in the Senate. What's the strategy for promoting this, the narrative, whatever, to get people in the Senate to vote for this thing?
Well, we had a test vote in the Senate on the budget. Senator Thune put up a test vote on death tax repeal on the budget, and he got 54 votes for repeal. So it's 6 short of the 60 you would need to break a filibuster. There was only one Democrat who voted for it, Joe Manchin from West Virginia. One Republican who voted no, Susan Collins from Maine, and so it was right at 54. I think it's going to be very difficult to get to 60. Now, of course, it's something they could include in budget reconciliation and do with 50. That's how they did it last time it was cut in 2001. But I think that the sense is that it's better to use that to focus on health care and trying to get rid of Obamacare. And so I don't think they're likely to do that. I do think that we need to push for, at a minimum, a vote in the Senate, a real vote, not a test vote, a live vote on the House-passed bill. And we've got to bring some pressure to bear on some of these Democrats. The map this time makes it a little tough to pressure people who are in cycle, because there aren't a lot of Democrats in cycle because 2010 was such a Republican year, but there's certainly Bennett from Colorado should be vulnerable on this issue. Maybe someone like Murray from Washington State, which has a lot of timber that's been affected by this. Maybe someone like Dick Blumenthal from Connecticut, though that would be a stretch. But then you got these 2018 Democrats, many of whom are going to be extraordinarily vulnerable on this issue. And if we make clear to them that this vote's going to matter for that, you can bring people like Heidkamp from North Dakota, Donnelly from Indiana. And so I think, if we put a lot of pressure on, I don't think we can quite get to 60, but I think we can make it a very, very tough vote. And I think we can get close. And I think we can set ourselves up to where after the next presidential election, this is something we could actually accomplish. And so I don't want to get people's hopes up too high and think we're going to get this tax repealed this year. I think that's going to be very, very difficult. But I think the exercise of trying will be politically clarifying, and it's important to start voting on this again.
It amazes me, Phil, that, in this land of the free and all that we actually have a tax which is nearest, in fact, to the way the French tax their people, and not the way a free people pays for its government.
Yeah, I excuse me, I really agree with that. One of the principles of the U.S. tax system is that we don't tax assets, we tax income. Excuse me. And this tax deviates from that. It basically says if you've been successful, we're going to take a big percentage of it.
Steve,
sorry, guys, I'm getting over a cold here.
Hang in there, Phil.
Steve, you want to do your mid-session break?
Oh, yeah, we can take a really quick break, and you can get a drink or catch a breath or something like that. I wasn't ready. I was kind of sleeping at the switch here. Hold on a second. All right, Phil, hang on the line there. We'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to find the way to play this thing. Here we go.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. The Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
This is GrokTALK. We are speaking to Phil Kerpen from American Commitment about death taxes. Welcome back to the program. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook and Twitter. Look for us under Granted Grok. And of course, lots of places you can listen to this program. If you're not listening to it live now, you're listening to it podcasted, and we'll go through a little bit later. Phil, you there?
I'm here, guys. Sorry about that.
I know, that's okay. Everybody gets the flu, and it's rough once you get that tickle.
If you believe it, I sounded a lot worse yesterday.
Did you really?
Yeah. But to your point, one of the things I point out in this column that I've seen very few other people point out, but I think is interesting. It's not a legal argument, but it's an interesting sort of philosophical point. The United States Constitution actually prohibits seizing someone's estate at death as a penalty for treason. The logic behind that being that you don't punish the next generation for the sins of the father and what have you. The idea that we would now seize 40% currently, it used to be 55% of an estate as a penalty for success, just for achieving the American dream, for doing absolutely nothing wrong, when we live in a country where our founders prohibited seizing an estate as a penalty for treason is, I think, pretty outrageous.
Well, let's face it, there's no penalty for treason anymore.
Well, yeah, that too.
Yeah, you're locked in the House or Senate chamber. That's what pretty much for 40, 50 years.
Or White House.
You actually made me think, Phil, about an issue that we talk about a lot in New Hampshire, which is civil asset forfeiture, which keeps coming up every year in the State House. We keep trying to pass a bill to, limit it to criminal asset forfeiture. And it just, you're talking about the founding. You don't take people's property even for treason, and yet we have this other circumstance where the police will just seize property under the assumption that it had something to do with illegal activity. Yeah,
that's really outrageous. That's a huge problem we have across the country. And of course, unfortunately, even if you get a great state law passed on that, there are a lot of states that prohibit it, and the police forces just go through federal asset forfeiture and get the money back and launder it that way. So even where you have state laws, they're not necessarily effective.
Well, unless the state laws prohibit federal agents from seizing assets, which they should.
Yeah. You guys should have my friend Eben Thampy from Americans for Forfeiture Reform on if you've never had him. He's having an excellent cast.
What's his last name?
Thampy, Thampy.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So what else are you guys doing over there at American Commitment right now that's hot?
We're still doing a lot of work on trying to stop the FCC order to regulate the Internet.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that's been almost your life's work, fighting Bob McChesney, right?
It's been a major focus for a number of years, and we've been calling for Bob Menendez to resign for a while now, and he's been indicted. So
that might be in place right now with his own actions.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is he's actually getting sympathy because it looks like it's politically motivated for critiquing the regime. I mean, I've read background. I know the guy deserves it.
Well, read the indictment. That's all I could say to people who think that. Read the indictment and then tell me that. I mean, I think it's pretty devastating. And more to the point, when all of this news first broke 2.5 years ago, I said this guy needs to resign because otherwise he's going to be totally at the mercy of this administration that can choose when to proceed against him, that can threaten him, that can have him under their thumb. And if he really cared about Iran or Cuba or any of these other foreign policy issues he says he cares about, he would have stepped aside then when it became clear that that they had the goods on him instead of waiting so that they could control the timing and when to move forward and what have you. And so this idea that this is all politically motivated, well, there may be an element of that here. But that's why he should have resigned in the first place, that he couldn't be manipulated or pressured in that way.
Hey, Torricelli did it, right? A couple of Rolex watches and money to girlfriends, and Torricelli stepped aside. He was a New Jersey U.S. Senator.
Oh, New Jersey's unbelievable, and they had that app scam guy in the 80s.
Yeah, back Harrison or something like that. Williams or Harrison, something like that.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, we got rid of the torch and we got the lout instead. I mean, New Jersey's incredible.
And that would be Lautenberg. I'll just remind people who don't know that Cory Booker's in front of a grand jury as well related to the watershed shenanigans. And so it's like every statewide elected official in New Jersey's got legal problems.
They just moved to Chicago when they're done with their terms in New Jersey. It is bad.
Crazy.
And what makes these guys stoop over and take bribes for what appears a very little amount, too.
Well, they think they can get away with it.
Yeah. And I guess Menendez has some ties to Harry Reid, who just fell down in the bathroom.
I don't think it was a coincidence that Harry Reid announced his retirement right before this indictment came out, because the indictment it doesn't legally implicate Reid, but the optics of it are disastrous for him. On sort of the bribe side, $600,000 that's named in the indictment as a political contribution to Menendez from this guy went through Harry Reid's super PAC. And on the quid pro quo side, it has Menendez enlisting Harry Reid's office to try to get this guy off the hook with his Medicare fraud dispute. And so Harry Reid's on both sides of this thing.
Yeah, the Senate was quiet when Harry Reid was running it, but they weren't quiet behind the scenes, apparently. Like the Torricelli kept, $2.9 million in campaign funds and was doling it out after he was out of office to friendly candidates that worked with the outfits he was lobbying for. Should have been picked up again for that, but hey, if we can get rid of him one way, we'll take it.
He'll probably get a job as a consultant anyway. Afterwards,
they never leave. Once they go to Washington, they appear never to leave. It's a very comfortable place for a certain.
That's a topic. Another topic for a future discussion would be, people talk about term limits, but we had Senator Bob Smith on, and we were talking about term limits and staffers, and he says if you don't get rid of the staffers, it doesn't make a difference how many politicians you kick out of Washington.
Kennedy's.
That's what we've seen in California, where they have term limits, and the staffers basically run the place.
Right.
The members come in and out in a few years; they don't even know what's going on.
Yep.
Right. Well, I mean, the comedy Yes Minister was based entirely on that principle that the man who's nominally in charge of the department or the senator's office or whatever really doesn't do anything. It's the liberal cretins behind the scenes that control everything, and he just has to go along. They just pretend that he's in charge.
Well, that's a huge problem we have in Republican administrations, that the career staff just basically say, oh, yeah, I'll do what you want to the politicals, and then they just sort of slow walk and they kind of think, I'll be here when you're gone, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and we have to understand that the bureaucracy trends liberal, and the only way you're going to solve this is by permanently shrinking the bureaucracy.
Well, Phil, we're kind of coming to the end of the segment. Contact information? Website?
AmericanCommitment.org is the website, and the top item in the front is the one on the FCC Internet regulation. But if you scroll down a little bit, our death tax action item's right there on the front page as well.
All right, great. Well, hope you feel better.
Chicken soup.
Enjoy your weekend.
And if you'd like to send along contact information for your colleague, we'll certainly reel him in for a future event, and we'd love to talk to you again soon.
All right. You got it, guys.
Have a great weekend.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so Phil Kerpen, American Commitment. We got about a minute and a half. I just wanted to go through the typical morning stuff that we normally talk about, and I got to go find my little list. We're going to have Ed Naile is here to give us an update on vote fraud in the next segment. Huh?
I always love it when he comes on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So Ed will be talking about what's going on in Dover. He's got a nice stack of cards here for us to look at. And then we're going to have Ron Moore, the storm chaser. He's going to talk about us weather and climate. And then Kimberly Morin. We're going to start with the Balsams bailout, but who knows where we're going to go with that. And then the last segment, we have the town councilor, the chair of the town council in Derry, Mark Osbourne, who's going to come in and talk to us about his situation there with the unions and the budget. So a lot of stuff coming up. So stay tuned. We did start early. Officially, 9 o'clock
and that's
is our
another
start time.
case where the constituents would like to get the taxes reduced. They've actually elected legislators that would like to get a tax reduced. And lo and behold, the liberal machinery is ginning up fear and loathing to prevent the tax from being reduced.
Yep, and Kimberly Morin wrote a great article about that on Examiner. It's also posted at GrokTALK.com. You can go over there and take a look if you want to get a little advanced education on that topic before we get to it, as I poke around inside my bag and look for some stuff that I'm supposed to be reading but I don't have. And so we want you to hang on for all of that stuff. Once again, don't forget to go to cnht.org and make a donation. Help support this program and their efforts. And please go to GrokTALK.com, see what we do, read what we write. Quite a bit there, not always on Facebook. Some of us are very good at transporting that into social media, and others of us not so much. So you want to make sure you visit the website.
And you're looking at one of them. I'm not so hot with social media. If something's really interesting, I'll put it out on LinkedIn. And you'd be surprised the number of times I get comments from the left coast when I put stuff on LinkedIn.
Well, you've been pretty busy lately, so you haven't been able to write. So that's not your fault that you haven't been able to do that either. So, all right, we're going to go into our break. Just trying to kill some time here while I wait for this music to start. And this is GrokTALK. Skip had to leave us because he's not feeling well, but thanks for coming in and helping us get this all set back up. We'll be back in the next segment with Ed Naile and a little bit of voter fraud from Dover. Stay tuned.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
"There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change."
Jeanne Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to GrokTALK.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
And you don't have any excuse for not getting the news and opinion you can only get from GrokTALK.com, because we're on iTunes, iHeart, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, Tumblr, YouTube, Ustream, and more.
I'm out of fingers.
That's out of fingers, yeah. We just try to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to listen to us on their favorite platform, mobile or stationary, wherever you happen to be. Welcome back. Thanks to Phil Kerpen, who got up early and had a cold and helped marched us through this death tax thing. And but we're moving on to the next segment. Kimberly Morin a little bit later. Mark Osbourne a little bit later. Ron Moore will be joining us to talk about climate and weather. And right now we have Mr. Chairman Ed Naile to talk to us a bit about some things in Dover.
Good morning, boys.
How's it going?
Well, as you know, we've been battling voter fraud here in the state of New Hampshire in all its myriad of appearances. And we went to Dover for a hearing with the Ballot Law Commission back on March 23rd, I think it was. And what happened was there's one of our tax warriors, anti-tax warriors in Dover, is Dave Scott. He was a former city councilor. He was a former state rep. And he's a perennial thorn in their side down there. A pretty sharp character. He had started a petition under RSA 65438 to have the city of Dover purge its voters list. This is highly outrageous. I mean, who would think that outside the 10-year period when we purge our list that you would have a city do that? That's just crazy. Well, Manchester did it last year, January of 1st of 2014. They purged their list before the upcoming election, and they mailed out 8,165 letters to people who hadn't voted in a while, and 4,400 letters came back. 130 people said, yes, keep us on the list. Nashua did it in 2005, so this is not unprecedented, but we had the panic attack by the city of Dover's officials that we were going to do something horrible to them. Well, we had already started tracking this under the statute that Dave Scott used. It's a law that hasn't been used in 40 years since it was passed that we know of. And you have to have some sort of proof to do this. So Dave Scott had his group go down and hand transcribe the voter checklist from November 6th, I think, November 4th, 2014, of same-day registering voters. Because the time frame to get this done, you have 5 Fridays is your time frame to file for this petition. You have to have something to go on, and he transcribed by hand, he and his group, the people who gave a name and an address to vote on Election Day. So he sent out something like 900 letters. And the city, after the election, doesn't have time to put them on the computer, straighten everything out, put them on. It's just what you find is what you have. So he mailed these out and got 70-some letters back as undeliverable, no such street, no such address. And we whittled those down to about 40, 45, something like that. And he picked up other stuff which they don't know about. So he handed those to me, and right away we started to do the background search on them. And our complaint was we're finding them registered in other states. So we have the hearing, and the complete Ballot Law Commission was there. All the members of the Ballot Law Commission, they had an attorney. Secretary of State Bill Gardner and the other one, David Scanlon, showed up. I think they might have had an attorney with them. I'm not sure. The Attorney General's office sent a guy named Steve Labonte. The city clerk was there with the city's attorney, for what that's worth. Municipal attorneys seem to be like the lowest form of attorney there is, next to people who work for the AG's office. So everybody's there, and then they had a whole bunch of state reps and people that showed up to testify. So they set the parameters as the thing starts. They set the parameter as we're only going to discuss, because no one's ever done this. Oh, and they had it transcribed. They had a court reporter there. I thought she was a reporter. She came over and asked my name and how to spell it. She had a reporter's notebook. So I'm thinking she's a reporter, and then I see the transcription thing. Ooh, now I can get a transcript of this. So here we go. So there's a guy named Brad Cook who's an attorney, and he started off, here's all we're going to talk about, whether or not the officials in Dover are doing their job according to the law. And I went, cha-ching. I couldn't believe my good luck, because I had a 7-page memorandum from the Attorney General's office that came out on March 21st, just a few days before the it was October 21st, 22nd, something like that, of 2014. This memorandum from the Attorney General's office came out to all election officials, and somehow I got a hold of it. I don't know how that happened, but somehow someone mailed it to me. 7 pages of how to proceed on Election Day on November 4th, 2014, and it said, under no circumstances is anyone to be turned away. Twice it says that, and then it says, if someone comes in and they have no identification, it says, they shall be given the opportunity to sign a domicile affidavit. I thought, this is great. What my good fortune. So that's like the first thing out of the box was, well, how could they possibly have done their jobs if the Attorney General's office, the guy that wrote the memorandum, is right there? I said, how could they possibly have done their job if the memorandum says no one is to be turned away? It's a job of the local election officials to turn somebody away who's not domiciled. If they have evidence that you don't live there, if they say, I know you, you don't live here. You
right,
live
exactly that.
And the statutes are all in favor of the local officials.
Yeah. I mean, the whole point is you're from the town, you know who's registered to vote in the town, and you know most of the people that live in the town.
Right.
If somebody shows up who's obviously from elsewhere and can't produce a license, a bill, or anything that says, yeah, I just moved in down the street, why the heck should they vote?
Like 1,200 people did that election. 1,200 people showed up to register the same day, and a percentage of them had no identification on them. So here we are. So my first question is back to the Ballot Law Commission. Well, how could they possibly have done their job? Because the Attorney General's memorandum says, under no circumstances, you've just stripped the right away of the local officials to do their job, and the chief election official for all of this is the Secretary of State, not the Attorney General. They investigate crimes. They make, they have their own little area of expertise they don't do. So so I said, the other problem is, how would anybody know? Because starting in 2004, somewhere in that area, the Democrats have stripped any transparency from voter registrations. I said, so when someone comes in and gives a name or an address, that's all a voter gets to see. So how can I challenge anyone who I believe is not a resident? First, and the other part of that is, in 2004, the Attorney General's office had an 8-page memorandum says, challengers shall have evidence or they'll be charged with a felony. So we've pretty much intimidated most people out of challenging voters with the first memorandum. This memorandum strips the rights of the local officials to do their job and says they shall be offered an opportunity to, they shall be offered a challenged voter affidavit. It doesn't say they shall sign. It just says they shall be offered. That's nice. So the way we use words in the English language and law in New Hampshire is domicile can mean anything at all. So shall be offered doesn't mean shall sign, as far as I'm concerned, when these people are sending it out. So then I said, well, now that I can no longer see anything on a same-day voter registration card or the affidavit, all I see is a name and an address. How am I on that point, at that point right there, to be able to challenge anybody? And how am I ever going to know whether that person was a resident of New Hampshire or not, domiciled here or not? Because the list that we got back from the post office, we mailed some of these people twice, and some got registered letters. They're coming back, no such street, no such address. I found no such name. Well, they're saying you misspelled it. Well, I have what I got from you. So if I could say, hey, it's a week after the election, I'd like to see the voter registration card. Back when CNHT first started to investigate voter fraud, it would have the person's name, and it would be off of your driver's license, which you probably would have brought with you, right? My driver's license says Edward M. Naile. That's what would be on that card. Now you just say, hey, I'm Jerry Springer. I'm Bill Smith. I'm Felix Papalardi. You don't have to say, I'm Robert H. Jones the third or Jr. You just give them 2 names, first name, last name. And the address, we don't even take whole addresses. We'll take 39 Oak Drive, Unit 5, Unit 75. No, 35 Oak Lane, 39 Oak. That's all you get. So we have almost no information to go by and no way to prove it. So we went hash that. I tried to explain it to him over and over again. One guy on the committee, I have to get his name, but said, well, if my daughter registered to vote at UNH and she lived in another state, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. As long as she makes UNH or Durham or Plymouth or Keene or Hanover her domicile. Legally makes that her domicile, it's no problem. But 2 years later, when she's still registered in Connecticut or New York, that's a problem. Because on the voter affidavit it says, I hereby swear under penalty of perjury, I am not domiciled or voting in any other state. RSA 654-7. Look it up. Real easy. I've had state reps argue with me it doesn't say that. So we had, after it was over, the local officials got to testify what a great job the city was doing. And some of the state reps said, well, I send things out, I don't get anything back. Sometimes I get a dozen. I had a state rep there that did a targeted mailing to just a couple thousand voters in 2006. We started this in 2004 in Dover. So we have records from 2004, 2006. This is what Phyllis Woods got back. She only ran in 2 wards, and she's only voting in the regular, this was from the primary, October. This is from the primary. She's only sending to a specific narrow group of people. This is what comes back. Mm-hmm. So if I'm to believe Representative Southworth from Dover that he doesn't get anything back, is the town clerk cleaning up the Democrat side and not the Republican side? Logical question to ask, right? So we're done with that part. We're called racist, and some of the state reps were getting up and saying, well, we know why they're really here, because these are activist Republicans. Being a registered Democrat, I took offense at that right off the bat. Right? So I let a couple of the guys run that theme before I told them I was a registered Democrat. So the committee went out, and then we got to hear from the attorney for the city of Dover, who said we refused to send them any information. Well, that was Friday before the hearing. They sent us a request for the information that we were going to use as our evidence. The hearing's on Monday. So when would you have looked at it? If we send it to you Friday and the hearing is Monday, when would you have looked at it? I had one request from the AG's office. What are you going to use for evidence? Well, we have like a filing cabinet full of evidence, and we have stuff going back to 2004. So I sent them 4 non-resident voter addresses. Never came up. Never came up. Now, wouldn't you think, when I brought up the fact that I have no way of telling Ballot Law Commission in charge of this, I have no way of telling who's who because I can't see a voter registration card. Now, the lawyer says, we refuse to turn over everything. Every one of them knows I sent 4 names. You know they're waiting on the other end. What does he have? What does he have? So why doesn't the head of the Brad Cook, he's an attorney, he thinks logically like I do, tree surgeon. You would think he would say, hey, could you pull those 4 names? Give us those 4 same-day voter registration cards. Let's say they look like they're this big, right? Let's say this is a same-day voter registration card. City clerk, could you pull them for us and just take a look? Oh, look at that. So-and-so registered to vote same day, but didn't say they were from Connecticut, where Ed has found them a registered voter. Didn't say they were from Pennsylvania, where Ed has found them as a registered. Didn't say they were from Florida. Maybe he has a point. It never came up. It's going to come up. So here's their problem. I think they voted against us unanimously, so the state reps were excited. The big, tall, bald-headed one was clapping in our, came over to the table to clap in our face. He's so excited that he won. Now I have, everyone was sworn to testify to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Lawyers, everybody who spoke. So the guys that get up and said, I don't get any returns. Mm-hmm. They're telling the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And the other ones that called us racist. So I guess I'm a racist now because they told the truth, whole truth. We were caging minority voters. That's what Dave Scott and I were doing. So I got everything I wanted out of this. In Dover, yeah. Yeah.
And then pouring gasoline on them.
Yeah, it was, what's the name of there's a minority section of Dover. So I got what I wanted. Here's what I wanted. I want to sue the state of New Hampshire for not keeping clean voter lists, as is required under motor voter and federal law. That's all I want to do. What I need to show the state of New Hampshire has taken no actions to solve that problem. And the Ballot Law Commission has handed me that. Because they went out in a couple of minutes. They didn't ask a single relevant question. They didn't understand what our testimony was about or pretended they didn't. So I got what I wanted there. And then a Foster's reporter came over to ask me some questions for his story, which our CNHT photographer caught. So I explained everything to him. And then what comes out in the story is a tad bit different. So their attorney, somebody sent me their city council meeting after I was there. And now they've gotten this down to zero. It was all a big mistake. Everything we found was transcribed improperly, or it was just a big mistake. So I got in touch with Dave. Scott sent me an email the day after. So we had the hearing on a Monday. We got in a lump, in a stack like this. We got a stack from the post office, 30 more returns the day after the hearing. So somehow those returns got bottled up at the post office until they accumulated 30, and they were delivered to us the day after the hearing. Okay, that's probably a big coincidence. Like our mail doesn't get delivered, our CNHT mail, or our voter guides don't get delivered till after the election.
Yeah, the post office never doesn't deliver one candidate's mailer the day before the election while another candidate's mailer
gets mailed. And the post office
mailed,
has never had to pay people back for not delivering their mail till after the election. So that's another story.
That makes me think. I mean, the Constitution said that the federal government shall establish post roads and post offices. I think it's high time that was completely eliminated.
No, they're going to eliminate themselves.
Yeah,
they're going to bankrupt themselves.
And that people simply pay to play to get stuff delivered. And I'll be really happy to get less junk mail too.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Welcome back to Grok Talk, brought to you by GraniteGrok.com and the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers, chairman of whom is with us, Mr. Ed Naile, to talk about a little voter fraud in Dover and having the ballot commission right where he wants them. And
yeah, they're irrelevant. They're right where they were before they showed up. They're irrelevant. So what happens is now we've gone through the hearing. They got their wonderful hearing. It's all been transcribed. We videotaped it. And now we go through the process of 91A. So I know when Dave Scott took off for the Ukraine, he'll be gone for 3 weeks. When he comes back, I get my hands on those 30 envelopes, and I go through the rest of those. I got a guy, let's use him as an example, Connor Dieter hyphenated Leeds. How many Connor Dieter Leeds are there in America? Well, there's the one that votes. One. And he votes in Dover, and he's registered in Willimantic, Connecticut. I called there last Thursday. Yeah, he's a registered voter here. He's an active registered voter? Yes, he's an active registered voter in 2 states. So, when the Ballot Law Commission says, Ed, it's all a big mistake. You had the wrong address. You didn't have the right address. He has an address in Dover. I can go, yes, thank you. I know that. I could care less. I care about the other address in Connecticut. That's the one I'm after. So the New Hampshire Ballot Law Commission can just get in their kayak and paddle away. I don't care if I ever see them again. I got what I wanted. They didn't do their job. They didn't even pretend to do their job. But I can still call the ballot clerk in Willimantic, Connecticut, and get the voter history from Connor Dieter Leeds. I can get voter histories from Florida. I can get them from Pennsylvania. I can get them right off the internet from other states. Easy. I sent off a couple weeks ago a form. I mailed a form to the state of Vermont. The state of Vermont sent me by email their complete voter database, everybody who's a registered voter. Once I have that, I just go, oh, look, he's a registered voter in Burlington. You send a letter to Burlington, they mail you back his voter history, like we did with Stephen Cram, Jared Stephen Cram. I have his complete 6-page voter history from Florida, and I have his voter history from New Hampshire, which is very lean.
So why is it that New Hampshire doesn't keep voter history anymore? Is that
because we'll see them?
Is that because maybe the presidential primaries are part of this, but cheating needs to happen in New Hampshire for the establishment machinery of both sides?
It helps one party way more than it helps another party. So take a wild guess. It's my party.
Yeah, the one you're officially registered
my
to,
party.
as part of your long-term strategic involvement in Operation Chaos.
Yep, we got some strategery going on.
Yeah, you're going to vote for Hillary if they propose Liz Warren or the O'Malley
do whatever I can to forward the champion the ideals of non-progressivism. So in any case, I'd take that off the table. Parties shouldn't mean anything. So what we have is we now have the city clerk in Dover has made statements under oath about what she does. So it's 5 months after the election. Why is he still a registered voter in Connecticut? Why is the other ones registered voters in other states? Did she send a letter? If she says she did and she didn't, I can go to the other state and say, could I have a copy under the right to know law? Or have one of my friends in the other. Remember, I'm working with other states. I can have somebody from the other state say, could I get a copy of any letters sent from the state of New Hampshire to your city to remove Connor Dieter Leeds? And if it comes back, we didn't send any, and the city clerk says she did, that's where they're at now. So I steer that little boat. I don't care about them.
Have they actually said that they've followed the law and sent these out, or have they simply said?
They said that's what they do, and that's why no one gets these. See, they're very good at keeping a clean list, and they send the other. They do it immediately. That's their story.
That's their story, but you can prove that they're wrong.
Well, all I can do is have the other state say, yeah, they're the registered voter here. I hand them an address, the guy's birth date. How did I get his birth date? I get his birth date from the other state. Because in the other states, you can see where they voted from previously, their birth date, some of their voting record, when the last time they voted was, right on the internet. So I can get their signature. Like Sarah Ostino, I can't get her. She stole a vote here in New Hampshire in 2012 from the town of Meredith. She's a campaign operative. She travels all over the country. Well, a month before she was here, she was in Arizona collecting petition signatures to get somebody on the ballot, and I got her signature from her petition application in Arizona. So I can go to these other states. I don't think the Ballot Law Commission understands that. I don't think they care. It doesn't matter to me. I keep telling people, I don't care what Bill Gardner does or Scanlon or the AG. I'm going to stalk you in your home state because you're still a registered voter there. That means on that affidavit it says, I swear under penalty of perjury I'm not domiciled in any other state. Now, here's the fun thing for you college students. When you come here from Pennsylvania or you come here from Maryland and you vote in New Hampshire and can't find a job, where do you go? Back to mommy and daddy's house. I have a whole list of you college students who voted in your mommy and daddy's residence here in New Hampshire, and then after you're out of school, back at mommy and daddy's. So that shows you were never domiciled here. You kept a current registration, an active registration in that other state. During a presidential election, that's a violation of federal law.
Now, have you ever been able to catch these people not merely being registered in two places, but actually doing an absentee ballot from mommy and daddy's place?
Yeah, we got, Jared Stephen Cram is one of them, and we got another guy named Baker from Dover. I have his voter. Now, I just have to confirm absolutely 100% it's the same guy with the same phone number and the same birth date in Dover as the guy with the same phone number, the same birth date, and the same middle initial in Florida. So Florida has sent me, and their ballot supervisor stamped it and mailed me a copy of his voter history in Florida. Now, if you guys look at, there's a group, Jay Delancey runs a group called the Voter Integrity Project in North Carolina. They do the same thing. They just had their first arrest from the information they turned over to down there it's all counties. Here it's state. So we have one goober in charge of everything who lets another goober be in charge of him. So and down south it's by county. They just had their first arrest. They started with that in October of last year. We caught Jared Stephen Cram October 8th of 2014. So this thing has a lag time. And in that lag time we had the little dust up with the Ballot Law Commission, which only serves our purpose, to show that New Hampshire isn't interested in cleaning this up at all. So we're now on the process of confirming as best we can with very little information. First name, last name, and some sort of an address, mommy and daddy's house or who knows where. We're confirming that one by one. So I have, the girl from Pennsylvania, from my hometown in Pennsylvania, is registered and an active voter since 2004 at her parents' house. Mm-hmm. And she lives in New Jersey but voted in New Hampshire. So she's either moved from her New Jersey residence to New Hampshire, or now I have to go to that New Hampshire address and see if it's a real address, because that letter keeps coming back as undeliverable. We had one certified letter that was refused. That means somebody was there. So now Dave and I will start visiting those properties. We also have like a drug rehab center. People are voting from a 30-day drug rehab center. People are voting. And the drug rehab center, the address, 272 County Farm Road, isn't on the tax rolls. Everything else is. So being a selectman, I go to their assessment card of the property in question. I have another guy who sent an absentee ballot, and it came, his address, all the mail to him comes back as undeliverable. He lives in a condo. There's 4 units. 1, 2, 3, and 4. He's got a name this long. You're going to tell me the mailman can't put that in the right box? Oh, it didn't. It's this address, but it doesn't say which unit, so I won't deliver it. I had to go to him because I don't have a single address in Dover for him, but I have multiple addresses in other states. But I know he's voting in Dover by absentee. So in 3 weeks, 2 more weeks, when Dave Scott comes back from Ukraine, then we take the locals in town and we start going to these properties and nailing down the rest of it. And I'll turn them over to their state. So I've turned Jared Stephen Cram over to Pennsylvania, to authorities there, and I'm waiting for a response, which I'm going to get from Pennsylvania.
All right.
That's what we're doing.
That's the end of that segment. We're going to be right back with Ron Moore, our storm chaser. Stay tuned. Thanks a lot, Ed. We'll see you.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by SaberPac.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
We are struggling. Rising healthcare costs are part of the problem. Senator Jeanne Shaheen helped create this mess we're in. As a state senator, her bill chased 21 insurers out of our state. It reduced our choices, raised prices for New Hampshire families, and when Jeanne Shaheen supported Obamacare, it limited access to 10 of our 26 hospitals, reducing our choices again. Tell Jeanne Shaheen she's made healthcare worse. Few things are as important as finding the right doctor. And under Obamacare, that's harder than ever. Over a third of our hospitals no longer available. Our doctors no longer covered. Fewer choices, longer drives. No state has been harder hit than us. And even after watching it impact New Hampshire, Congresswoman Ann Custer still supports it. Call Ann Custer. Tell her Obamacare isn't working for New Hampshire.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Three, two, one.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
Thanks again to Ed Naile for the last segment. Phil Kerpen from American Commitment joined us in the first bonus segment, 8:30 to 9, when we normally do a pre-show. But because of his schedule, we wanted to get him on the program to talk about the death tax, and that was the only time we could get him in. So we came in early, and Skip helped set up, but he had to go. He wasn't feeling very well. We're still here. Coming up, we have Mark Osbourne from Derry. We have Kimberly Morin, who's going to talk with us about the Balsam's bailout and probably a couple other things, because we don't actually have any other segments in which to just talk about whatever we want.
And right now we have Storm Chaser Extraordinaire, Ron Moore from Merrimack.
Ron, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Sounds like you guys are having fun this morning.
We are. We always have fun.
I know. Isn't it great to live life that way?
It is, yeah. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, it is. Free, man. Free. I love it.
All right, so, it's gotten a little warmer. Is spring here?
No, sadly not.
No?
No, I was actually just telling you, I said my on Facebook I put out about a month ago. I actually ripped off some other people, too. I think Dopus already mentioned some others, that there'd be snow on the ground Easter Sunday, so I've been kind of selfishly hanging in there all week watching it stay in our subdivision here. I'm like, okay, we got enough snow on the ground. It'll be tomorrow morning. There'll be snow on the ground, but this week will be very chilly. In fact, I would not be surprised if we don't get some snow this week. I don't know if it'll stick in April, but we're definitely back in the winter season again this week.
Mm-hmm. I have some grass. I can see the grass and the mud, of course, but I have places around my house where I still have a good 2 feet of snow.
Yeah, I got a couple of snowbanks that are that big, but the snow that just sort of fell and drifted, I don't think I got anything deeper than 9 inches to a foot anymore. I got quite a bit of grass. I had a couple of notorious bald spots where leaning trees have caused the snow to be thinner, and the sun sort of wipes that out first, and then it grows.
Yeah.
So I got quite a bit of grass.
Yeah, at nighttime what I do, I go through the subdivision and I make sure it's plowed really deep and hard. They don't know it, so that it sticks around for like a month longer at the end of the season. That's what weather weenies do, man. If you love snow, you make sure it stays in the shade, stays deep, and becomes a little glacier. Kind of give Mother Nature a little help there. It's kind of sick, I know, but yeah, it'll be chilly. Today will be not bad. Yesterday was gorgeous, but we figured. And of course, yesterday with that warmth, that surge came in from the southwest, and everybody saw all the tornadoes we had the last couple of days, which is totally normal for this time of the year. Mm-hmm. People down that way are usually planned and prepared for that kind of thing. So,
So how far up did the tornadoes reach, Ron?
This last outbreak we had,
mm-hmm.
I think they got into the Tennessee, Arkansas, mostly in the Ozarks, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, Kansas, that area, right in that four-corner region, which we have actually done a lot of chasing in that area around Joplin, Missouri. And that's probably going to be your epicenter this year. It'll go out, of course, with the season, round about that into the Southern Plains and Mississippi Valley. But I really think, a lot of the good forecasters are on this stuff too, that these surges of cool air are going to keep coming into the Northeast. If it weren't for that, we probably would have more of a severe weather season up here in May. But I got to tell you, I was just looking through, spent the last 2 hours before coming on the show here, looking over some of the long-range 45-day model type thing, and it's amazing. May looks really chilly. I mean, cold. Mid to late May could have some 30-some to 40-degree mornings, quite a few.
So I think I heard that this year some of the long-range forecasts are calling for more tornadic year than we've had recently. Is that true?
Yeah, especially than recently, because the last three have been duds. I mean, as a chaser goes, now, as people, we all know one twister, can do all the damage you need done. But for number-wise, yeah, I was just actually sharing with some folks the other day. It's funny how perception changed, I said, because in, I think, 1910, the Weather Service said Iowa had 2 twisters a year, Kansas had 4. Well, now we know Iowa has about 56, Kansas has about 100. So just based on people seeing them, makes it, obviously, cell phones and cameras and everything else. So for the last 3 years to be as low as they were was really remarkable. I mean, especially when you got the Moore clan out there, us out here getting anything and everything. We don't find anything still, We're looking for anything that's spinning on the ground. So for the folks out there, it's been good. But, yeah, I think you're going to see, as you said, some of the long-range forecasters picking up on that. And they're almost all consistent that from now to the end of May, sporadically we're going to have some big outbreaks.
Now, last year I know that Joe Bastardi and Joe DeLeo had some early predictions about a pretty decent hurricane season compared to what we'd had in previous years, but that never really panned out. Is it possible that could happen with tornadoes?
Yeah. Well, and actually, I think this year, again, looking at the patterns, and tornadoes are, they come from a western trough. You look at the jet stream, and anybody who looks at the weather map, the weather channel, they use a pretty decent job of that too, showing that western trough dipping in. When you see that, you've got a Plains and Mississippi Valley outbreaks coming in. So that's setting up for the next 2 weeks. For New England, it's really different. It's hard to, well, one thing, it's hard to get them up here, but we do get them, and we do get some pretty bad ones. But I think that from here, like I said, to the end of May, you're going to see about a 6 or 7 week period of really active weather. And I think on my Facebook page, the storm warning, I think I actually put in there a forecast that it would be right about now, Easter week. The last week of April would be pretty active, and that a good chunk of May, and especially the last 2 weeks, would really be active. I'll throw this out there, too. There's what they call, and I didn't come up with this, it's called the LRC. It's a 45, you guys may know about it, the 45 to 50-day cycle. That whatever's happening right now, you can look for that general pattern 45 to 48 days out, and that's really working well this year. And that would tell us.
What drives that, Ron? Is that some sort of global circulation pattern, some oscillation somewhere?
It is. It's recurring cycles. Exactly what it is. It's global circulation patterns. You can look at it gets into a rhythm. The atmosphere does. Then it breaks down every fall. It goes into another repetitive pattern, which is why I've told everybody for years. I said you have very short-term 45-day cycle. You have a few-year cycle. You have a 40-year cycle. Then you have they go up to a 100-year cycle to a 1,000-year cycle. And I don't know that in our modern day we've seen them all come on top of each other, but if they ever did, you get into some pretty big stuff. This winter was a showcase, I think, of what a 1 to 200-year cycle. I've heard people say a 1 in 2,000. It's not that dramatic, but it's what we had this winter was colonial day type stuff,
I was talking to Dr. Joe last fall, and he was talking about we were talking about those cycles lining up with the with the decreased solar activity and a bunch of other things piling up, and people talking, and it was really beginning to stir discussion about another Maunder minimum.
Yeah, yes, and it's really been funny since I've listened to Jody, which I have for many years, but really more closely studied his stuff on sunspots. That's just been the last 2 years. I went back and looked at his work on that really quality work. And he's right. That's not my specialty, but you're exactly right. That lends to this thing really going into something that's really dramatic. And sadly, as we all know, if you're always going to climate change, global warming, whatever they want to call it, whatever the new name is for it, it takes away so badly from what we're really facing, like a winter like this one when no one was ready for snow and cold, and it hits again. It's really a hardship on the people. Which is why I tell folks, I say, we really got to look at weather as a science, not as a religion.
Yeah, and there's danger signs out there that we're not done with ice ages. I mean, the mini ice age was less than 200 years ago, and we were climbing out of it in the first part of the 20th century, which is why that warming trend that they're talking about was really a recovery trend.
You nailed it, yeah.
And more to the point, there was some excellent work done, and I wrote about this a year or so ago on cosmic rays and solar wind and solar cycles, and if it turns out that if we're still within one of the spiral arms of the galaxy and the cosmic ray activity is high and the sun goes into a sleepy spell, you get more cosmic rays equals more cloud equals colder Earth equals mini ice age, or maybe not so many.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And and again, I heard yesterday bad economic numbers for the wintertime because of the cold and snow, which couldn't have been predicted. Well, that's what they said last year. Well, we've been telling them that if it gets cold and snowy, it impacts everything. You don't want a colder climate. Actually, like you said, a warmer climate is actually what brings back economic boom and all the above. So, so people, got to be ready for this. And I know the next winter they're already looking for the same thing. I know Weather Bell, not to give them a shameless plug, but they have been saying that the next winter is going to be a very similar one. And so people should be getting ready for that stuff. But, the hurricane heat, you mentioned, I do agree. That is what I did study at Florida State. And I do think the Gulf Coast is threatened for obvious reasons. The Gulf temperatures are just searing right now. It's like a bath down there. I remember we lived in Tallahassee for a number of years. And the water, you go down there and lay in the water. I don't know if you've ever been to the Florida Panhandle, but in that area, the water doesn't stir much. It can be 91-degree water temperature.
Wow.
I've never been able to get my outdoor pool that warm. I used to have an above-ground pool in a previous house. I had a solar blanket on it. And if you worked really hard, you might get the water up to 75, 80 degrees, but never 90.
Really? 91's not comfortable. I'm telling you, it's almost, it's hot. And that's why I say this year, the water, my friends down there tell me, it's just really, really warm in the waters in the Gulf of Mexico. You get a storm, and you probably have an early season. I mean, June can crank them up if the conditions are right down there. With a very weak El Nino coming on, that can actually give the spin it's needed in the Gulf of Mexico, and boom, they start cranking out.
So here's a contrast. If the water's that warm, and people who don't understand what warm and cold water do to weather should probably spend some time at Weather Bell or do a little research because it's pretty damn important. But it sounds like we're going to have a really short growing season this year up here in contrast to what's going to go down there.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's where your variability occurs in agriculture. Seasons shift back and forth, and it's what makes the north so hard to do certain crops up here, because I actually know a few friends of mine that do that up here, and it's amazing learning the difference between New England and, say, Georgia and Alabama. Of course, we all know north and south, but like you said, the Gulf has such an influence as opposed to Newfoundland, how that affects us up here in Nova Scotia, still getting the winds off those areas. If we get any east winds this year in northeast, I heard yesterday was that Eastport, Maine still has 70 inches on the ground. I mean, my Lord. Get a northeast wind all summer, man. We've got an air conditioning blowing on us. So
I called a shop up there last month. They have a local author that we wanted to get signed copies, and I said, sorry, the store's closed right now. It's snowing again. And I said, we got about 6.5 feet down here. He said, look, we got over 12.
And they're not used to that. So well, that's Eastport, Maine. No, they're not the snow capital. It's usually Caribou. So Eastport, I think they're double what they usually get, or maybe higher than that even. It's just extreme out that way.
They were buried. And
they really were.
They're little narrow streets, too. They've not got that many places to shove it unless they push it straight down to the harbor.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yeah, it makes a world of difference.
So, are we going to be able to get any plants in the ground before June or July?
Again, the people I know in agriculture, they ask me, I tell them, I say, hey, go to somebody that you pay service for. I don't want to mess your business up. But I'm like, it's scary because we're going to have freezes this week, which that's not that unusual. I mean, it does do that up here. In fact, I've got these books that show it's snowing on July 3rd across most of New England. That's back in the 1800s. I'm like, that's ridiculous. But it does happen. And this, I think, is going to be one of those really short growing years, yeah. And thank God we have other places. Not California, because apparently they can't grow anything. There's no water left out there, so,
Well, there'd be a lot more water left if they didn't just dump it all into San Francisco Bay to keep those little delta smelts going.
I wasn't even going to go there. You're exactly right. There's so much policy behind, Mother Nature and God get blamed for so much. And it's policy that drives so much of this junk. So many of these things just to get broken down. We actually have the watershed in North Florida has been affected. The people moving in there, and there's been a big fight over the Chattahoochee watershed in Georgia and Alabama. And folks down there don't realize. They think it's the weather that's caused it. It was policy. In those three states, they can't get nothing done together. So you're stopping water, you're letting it go. We've got to work on the policy end of these things, and things will be a whole lot easier on us.
All right, we got about a minute.
You know what they need to do is set an agreed price per acre foot. And then all of them pay the same price, and then you'll see who can be efficient.
There you go. Yeah, level the playing field here. Exactly.
All right, we got about a minute. Plug your book and your Facebook page again, and any last comments?
Sweet. Facebook page is the Storm Warnings is the best place to go get it. The other is at Amazon is the book Storm Warriors, Saving a King, and that's pretty fun. It's for kids, generally like 7 to 11 years of age. It's a true story, but it's a fun adventure. The other thing I'd say that we'll be out storm chasing in late May, spending at least 2 weeks out in the Great Plains this year. And while we're out there, we'll probably be chatting with you guys. Maybe even if you guys want to have us in on that Saturday, we can tell people what's been going on or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. just to let you know where we're at, what we saw that week. So that should be a lot of fun. And, all that's good. And happy Easter, Resurrection Sunday to everyone out there.
All right,
and
you
thanks
too.
For having me on the show. Enjoyed it.
All right, thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
Great. You do the same thing. Hey, stay warm.
All righty, bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Welcome back. We had Ron Moore on. If you missed him, I didn't have a chance to tweet that out. I apologize. I was busy enjoying the conversation. Phil Kerpen, of course, this morning, and Ed Naile was with us. We're going to have Kimberly Morin in the next segment, and then Mark Osbourne is coming to the studio to talk to us about the fun budget hijinks going on in Derry.
Absolutely. So Phil Kerpen first. I mean, he's one of my favorite policy analysts. He's always really got all the facts at his fingertips, and he's a shameless warrior for the free market. And it seems almost as if he's locked in a personal battle to the death with Bob McChesney, who is the communist leader of the laughingly called Free Press, who want in fact anything but. And the key people behind the push for net neutrality, which again is also anything but. And now the FCC have said they're going to regulate everything that moves on the internet. And all of a sudden, the people that thought net neutrality was going to help them, like the video pushers, Netflix, etc., suddenly found out that it's going to regulate them so heavily they didn't want it, after all. So be careful what you ask for, because government will give you more than you wanted. But Phil is a great policy analyst and warrior for the free market. That was a great segment.
Wait. This is what we should play this for those Netflix folks.
I am altering the deal. Pray I don't alter it any further.
That's what you get when you make deals with these socialist nut jobs.
Right. Well,
they keep changing the deal.
You sold your soul to the government. These people think that they can get protection from new upstart competitors or from some other entities they have to do business with by getting into bed with the government. And what usually happens is they get out with some horrible disease and they lose their shirts. Sorry, that's a little too graphic, but you get the idea.
Oh, yeah. No, if you want to follow Phil Kerpen on Twitter, his handle is Kerpen, Kerpen. And American Commitment's handle is AMERCOMM, and you can follow them, and you'll see some of that, because Phil is a very active tweeter, and he is always doing battle with somebody over some issue, so it's a great place to go and check out what he's up to and what he's talking about at that particular time. So we got a couple minutes before we bring Kimberly in to talk about balsams and whatever else. A lot of things always happening. The format changes. We don't always know how much time we're going to have to really just prattle on.
Right, and Obama is doing his best imitation of Neville Chamberlain. He's somewhere between being a Muslim supplicant and a foolish appeaser. And I get this great cartoon from Investors Business Daily and Michael Ramirez of John Kerry there as the Easter Bunny. And the text reads, anyone who believes Iran will live up to this agreement probably believes in the Easter Bunny. And in hops Kerry saying, I got a deal, in his bunny suit. And that's really about the way it is. Nobody believes that Iran will live up to this deal. And, in fact, they believe that they're effectively pre-cheating, squirreling away resources, trying to define what's off-limit for inspections. Does anybody believe that their super-secret nuclear lab under the mountain in Fordow is going to stop operating just because they somehow exclude it from inspections? This is not going to stop operating. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Israel and Saudi Arabia are figuring out what kind of bunker busters they're going to need, or even nuclear bombs they're going to need to stop Iran before it attacks them.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, they've admitted that they want to destroy us. Just come right out and said it. And then we also know that they condone lying or cheating or doing whatever it takes to advance the agenda, which is the spread of Islam, even if it means destroying themselves along with everybody else.
Well,
they've admitted to these things.
Exactly. So let's sort of take those pieces. So first of all, in what can only be described as a not exactly rare moment of honesty, the Islamic leaders, the Ayatollahs, and the generals have said that they want to annihilate Israel, that they want to destroy America, and they're looking for the means to do it. And there are times when you shouldn't take them at their word, but that, I think, is complete honesty. And what does Obama or Kerry say? Well, they have the right to their opinion. Does anybody possibly think that opinion is driving policy and spinning the centrifuges? It's ridiculous. And their alliance with North Korea has long been known. That's another rogue nuclear state. These two states are both engineering and testing and refining missiles, short, medium, and now long-range missiles, which will one day be far enough and accurate enough to do serious harm. The Russians are moving anti-missile batteries to their southern border in case Korea goes on the on the offensive. And meanwhile, we're sitting here fat, dumb, and happy. What defense have we got if either of these nations launches, for example, a high-altitude nuke and causes an EMP and wipes out some or all of our technology infrastructure? Let's say they don't even come close to our coasts and try and set it off over the heartland. What if they set it off over the Pacific Ocean and wipe out California's high-tech or Seattle's high-tech? That would do incalculable harm to our economy. And we're letting these folks, continue to develop and continue their unholy allegiance. When George W. Bush, bless him, said there's an axis of evil, he wasn't exactly pulling that phrase out of his hat.
Good choice of words there, hat.
You knew where I was going, and
I knew. I was just listening to see where you were going.
And I chose the Texan alternative.
Yes, out of your hat.
Instead of the place where the sun don't shine.
Yeah, it's I know a lot of people are purposefully overwhelmed by all of this, and the entire, the complexity of law, the complexity of the debate, the complexity of a discussion. It's almost like you need a degree, and you need to. We spend lots of time reading.
Yeah,
to understand the basics of issues, and most people aren't going to do that. They don't want to be bothered, and the entire establishment political complex has made it that way on purpose to keep them out of the debate. And so when you have a situation like Iran, where you have people who are promising that, they're like, we're going to bring the next Imam or whatever, the global Ummah. We've got all this.
Exactly. The 12th Imam.
Right.
Total global destruction, of which the only survivors will be burned and wizened Muslims.
We all go to heaven, all you infidels go to hell. They don't care. And people are like, they can't grasp that for some reason. Even though you have terrorists who blow themselves up to kill busloads of children or take out a building or even a marathon. And they just don't get it. It's very difficult to get people to connect to those issues and put the dots together with all the noise and the media control and and everything else. And so, that's one of the reasons why we do the show. We try to get people to share it. Please, if you listen or you share the podcast, if you know somebody who's concerned about some issues and we talk about something that you think they need to hear, please share the program with them. And, it's free. It really is. They don't have to listen if they don't want to.
Yeah.
But
And by the way, send us tips. If you've got ideas of stuff that ought to be discussed, you can send us a tip. You can call in. We should publish the number at the beginning of the show like Rush Limbaugh does. Or you can come in and talk to us and debate us if you disagree, too. We're happy to have everybody on. In fact, I understand that Skip has reached out to the campaign of Martin O'Malley.
That was Ed.
Sorry, that was Ed. Okay. because, well, yeah, Ed's the registered Democrat on the team, of course, because we want to hear what all the political candidates have got to say. We don't believe that Hillary's inevitable, and we don't believe that Jeb Bush is inevitable.
Correct. And we also are always looking for people who want to write for the Grok Watch News Desk. We have a couple folks, only one of whom has actually submitted anything. If you've tried to contact me at grockwatch@granitegrok.com and I have not responded, please continue to do so. I get a lot of mail, and I often have to go hunt down stuff that I know I should be looking for that should have come in that I didn't see. Mm-hmm. So, there's no real easy way for me to sort all that in my Yahoo mail, and it comes in, and I try to look at it whenever I can. If you are interested, even if you have just one story, if you want to write it anonymously, as long as we can verify the information, I would be happy to put it up for you.
Right. And then if you want to be anonymous, as in put your byline on it, we'll put your byline on it.
We can absolutely, whatever you want to call yourself, if you want to, I have been writing as me for as long as I've been doing this, pretty much.
And by the way, the authorities do watch, as in the time the AG's office came trying to hunt down James O'Keefe and came to my house and said, we know who you are, we read your stuff, we listen to your speeches, so don't think they don't, but we're not shy. If you want to be shy, we'll do it anonymous.
Yes, and we are willing to do that. We need to know who you are, but they don't. So that's another option that's available to you. Thanks again for listening and sharing the show and following us on Facebook and Twitter. Please check.
Let me put in a quick plug for something that's going on. So I said we don't believe that Jeb Bush is inevitable, but what are we going to do about it? Well, the answer is there are a couple of new organizations, and the nice thing is we've actually made the national conservative media now. The 603 Alliance is effectively a political organization. What's that?
Mark Osbourne's here for 10:30. So
okay, the 603 Alliance is a political activist organization that plans to bring together as many conservative and libertarian groups in the state as possible to bring the candidates before them and to put together an agreement that we are going to vet the candidates. We're going to hold a caucus in October, and the groups participating will agree that whoever wins the caucus will be the one that we will, at least the majority of us, will support, in an attempt to create a severe bump in the voting pattern, such that the best conservative actually gets a big chunk more votes than the rest, instead of them all getting about the same and the establishment candidate winning. Aligned with that, and with some of the same steering committee members, the Conservative Business League in New Hampshire exists to educate, promote, take money from members, and bring in the candidates. And there will be two kinds of events: those that the group puts on from the membership fees, and those that the candidates pay for the group to put on, as in organize a rally, set up a town hall, whatever. And that's how Ted Cruz came to do that big event in Merrimack last week.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We have to call Kimberly Morin. Stay tuned for more Grok Talk.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jean Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Jean Shaheen and her allies are making false claims about her record on veterans. The truth? Shaheen refused to meet with veterans pushing for reform. She wasn't on the committee that wrote the reform legislation and refused to co-sponsor important VA reforms in the VA Management Accountability Act until after the VA scandal broke. When our veterans needed her, Jean Shaheen was AWOL. Tell Jean Shaheen to stop distorting the truth and fix the VA.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at gerardatlarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now, at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
GrokTALK. 3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GrokTALK.com. We are your feared extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GrokTALK.com.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to GrokTALK. Thanks again to everybody. Ron Moore was joining us talking about weather. Just in case you missed that segment, it's going to be colder than usual until well into May. Thank you very much. And I'm just like, my wife was asking me about plants. She says, we got to get the seedlings started. You know, we got to be able to get the vegetables going, and we'll be able to. I'm like, I'm going to have to build a greenhouse because that is the only way anything is going to grow this summer. I just have this horrible feeling it's going to be cold and miserable like it was a couple years ago, and we had these tiny little tomato plants, and it was awful. Anyway, Ed Naile, of course, was with us to talk about vote fraud in Dover. We had Phil Kerpen from American Commitment on, and a little bit actually he's here already. Mark Osbourne from Dairy is with us, but we want to talk to Kimberly Morin, our pit bull. Can I call you that, Kimberly? Pit bull? You there? Kimberly.
She's there. She was chuckling.
Kimberly. Hello. Did you call her on line 1?
I did.
Okay. Well, I don't know where she is. I don't hear her.
Call's still there.
It's still there. Are you there?
I don't know if you guys can hear me, but I can't hear you.
I can hear you now. Oh, hold on. How about that?
Can you hear us now?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. Buttons. There's just too many buttons. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy Easter weekend.
Yeah, so Steve was saying, can we call you our pit bull? I think our chief troublemaker may be the better phrase, but boy, oh boy, when politicians' malfeasance rises to greater heights than usual, you certainly have a means of bringing them down a peg or two.
I just don't have to like people who do bad things.
All right, so we wanted to start with the Balsams bailout. I know that, well, I'm sure we'll talk about a whole bunch of things, but why don't you give people a short overview of what that's all about?
So, excuse me, clearly there has been a kind of a bunch of backroom deals going on because a developer wants to reopen the Balsams, which is up in North Cupcake, but it's a beautiful, beautiful resort that's been around for years in New Hampshire. It's actually historical, but they fell short. The developer fell short. He wanted, at first it was $100 million he needed to build it. Then it moved up to $143 million, but he can't quite get that last $28 million from private investors. So I believe it's Sticksville Notch that wants to change from an unincorporated place to have specific powers in order for them to, hang on, I'm trying to give you the exact language, so that they can have the authority, powers, duties, and responsibilities, so that they can, oh my God, sorry. I was up till 4:15 watching Firefly.
I was up for no reason, just so, you know.
It's permitting, basically, they will be permitted to establish tax increment financing districts in that place, in Sticksville Notch, so that they can, after they do that, then they'll be able to help finance the Balsams project with sort of the taxpayers of all of New Hampshire co-signing a $28 million loan. And, obviously this is crony capitalism. The government should never be involved in the private sector, picking winners or losers ever. But there's all kinds of background information on these people, and that's where it kind of lies the problem. Why are you giving this person $28 million to build something up that they can't get from the private sector? You know what I mean? Like, why is the government going to step in and give them money that they can't get from the private sector? Doesn't that tell you about what's going on, about the development that maybe people don't always think is going to actually work?
Well, it's not a solar project or anything, so that's a good question. I mean, if they were gonna say, well, the Balsams is going to be a bastion of New Hampshire green energy, they'd be throwing money at it like there's no tomorrow. But so there's a bill for this, right? Is it HB 30?
It's SB 30, and SB 30. Yeah, SB 30 went to one committee first in the Senate, who turned it into a study commission. Because basically the bill doesn't say we're going to co-sign $28 million for you. The bill is making it so that a county with unincorporated areas can establish the tax increment financing districts. So, this is just one area that would do it. Then other areas that are unincorporated could sign up to have the same ability. Mm-hmm. And are they going to all be putting their hands out, with the government?
Oh, yeah.
It's really the taxpayers.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than it sounds. The bill is literally just one page, so it's pretty straightforward. But the background of it is that they're doing this specifically to be able to help these developers of the Balsams get $28 million that the taxpayers will be on the hook for.
So, in other words, by creating effectively a tax and financing district, then Dixville Notch can claim that it will receive income from this, and therefore it can commit bonds with this as the collateral. Is that with that taxing power as collateral? Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah. Yep, exactly, because they'll be able to get, there's this, I was doing some research, and there's a certain way that they get the tax revenue from the project once they can get it, and they get an X amount of dollars of it. So I have to try to explain that in easier terms for people to understand, because I have to write about this. Mm-hmm. Because this is coming up in the House next Tuesday, April 14th, to be a committee hearing.
Why wouldn't they just build the project incrementally, and restore it in sections, and let the tourist revenue finance the rest?
Okay, so here's what happened. Two guys, and I can't remember their names exactly, DeGrasse and another guy. And I apologize because I was supposed to do more. I've been doing research, but I was supposed to set it all up nicely last night. But at 6:30, I threw my hands up in the air after having such a busy week and said, "We're watching Firefly." So
yeah, love that show.
I've never ever done that before. Just watched all these series in a row. So
yeah, it's only like 13 episodes. So yeah. I have it. I watch it about every year. Anyway, I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm a little, But so what happened is these two guys bought it several years ago, and they were local guys that bought it. And what they did was they said they were going to renovate it, make it up to date. But what they did was when they bought it, they closed it down instead of keeping it open while they renovated. It's a huge place. You could keep parts of it open and have others being renovated, at least bringing in a revenue stream. But they decided to close it down. So they weren't bringing in any revenue for it. And then they couldn't get the kind of financing they wanted. So they ended up stripping the place of everything and selling it. And they won't even tell people what they sold or how much they got for it.
Uh-huh.
So there's the transparency.
They were just trying to, they got into it, clearly had an idea, realized it wasn't going to work, so they just started, strip mining the property for whatever money they could get.
So if they stripped it and sold it, then I guess the state or the town is trying to deal with the new owners. Is that correct?
They did not sell it. They're part of this whole thing. Their part of being in on this project is they're ownership of the building. They're not putting up $1. They're not putting up a dime. So they have that ownership. Then they got together with Les Otten, who is a developer, and I'll go into him in a second, in the 90s. He's a multimillionaire, developer. He's put up $1 million. So these guys, the other guys that stripped the whole place, the original owners, put up just the building, and Les Otten put up just $1 million. And they got other private investors from other places to put in the rest of the money, but they came up short, and now they're looking to, Jeff Woodburn is a senator up there who's pushing this. They're looking for the taxpayers to say, come on, co-sign here, like mommy and daddy co-signing your first car loan, that kind of thing. And the thing is, Les Otten, he is a guy from the 90s who owns the American Skiing Company, and he did all kinds of ski resorts in New Hampshire and Maine, and almost went bankrupt in the 90s.
Correct.
Doing it.
Yep.
So, and he hasn't even finished on promises that he made with those original ski resorts. So, that tells you something right there. And there's another thing that I found, too, that when they were trying to get financing for Balsams, apparently they were looking for $30 million, and I don't know if this is the exact same $30 million. It's a little bit, I forget the word. It's not. I don't think it's coincidence that this is $30 million and they're looking for 28. And the owners right now are Dan Hebert and Dan DeGette. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but so they tried to get an application for. They tried to get investors, and they're exploring the government's EB-5 program, which is green cards. It's a program they get that offers green cards to a foreign investor and immediate families. So, if you give us $500,000, we'll give you a green card, and you and your family green cards, and you can come here and work. And they were denied that. People didn't want to do it. They were looking for investors to do that, and that obviously didn't happen. So the whole thing is, sorry guys, the whole thing is a huge boondoggle. There's been all kinds of backroom, this is obviously there's been all kinds of backroom deals going on that we don't know about because it's been completely intransparent. But then the Senate, it looked like the Senate wasn't going to pass this out of the committee as an actual bill to make the Dix will not be able to change to be a financing district. At first, it was just, it's going to be a study commission. And hey, study commission is great. Check into it, see if it really is useful. Or, it would not cause any issues. And somebody got to somebody, and last minute, Jeannie Forrester put up an amendment to make it go forward, and it did.
So has the Senate actually passed this and sent it down to the House?
Yes, it's in the House on Tuesday. I will be there testifying against it.
Okay. So I have to ask, since they've, A, come up short, and since, B, the folks who own the now shell of the former resort stripped out the buildings and somehow sold some of the equipment, furnishings, whatever that they stripped, how do we find out how much money they got from what they stripped? In other words, what have they cashed out here, and does it by any chance come anywhere close to the amount of money they're now trying to get from us?
They won't tell us.
There's got to be an auction or other record here. That stuff doesn't just...
They just sold it to a guy with a truck.
No, not that kind of quantity.
I don't know.
Big truck.
I don't know how to find that information. I know other people have. They have been asked, do you have a list? Obviously you would have a list of the inventory of the place and what you sold and how much you sold it for, and they will not provide that. But $28 million from us, but they won't provide a list of what they got from when they stripped the place instead of renovating it.
And does anybody have any clue how much money this place could be worth to the area? I mean, has anybody even tried to guess that it would actually make money?
Okay. I think the guys who bought it, Hebert and DeGuest, actually bought it for like $2.5 million or $2.3 million. Obviously, it's clearly probably worth way more than that. They got it.
Well, it's beautiful. It's beautiful up there.
Yeah, and so the ultimate goal of being totally open with all these, big, huge ideas and what they want to do is going to cost like $320 million, I saw. eventually. Not at first. That's moving on and on and on and on. But there's this too much backroom crony capitalism. I'll pat your back, you pat my back type of things going on in New Hampshire. Should absolutely not be involved in this. We were involved in something like this in the 90s, and I have to find out the historical details on it. And we were on the hook for $20 million, and it failed.
I was going to say, I mean, if it's really such a great deal, why isn't there a bank willing to put up the money? What do they have to do to the state for?
Well, or another private investor. That's the thing. If this was such a great idea, you would have people, knocking down your door saying, "I'll give you money here. Take my money."
Well, that tells you something. It either tells you something about the people that currently own it and are planning to develop it, that maybe they can't scare up the whole amount because the lenders want them to put some more of their own skin in the game as a safeguard, or it tells you that the deal's just not a good deal and that the place isn't going to generate enough revenue. The state's actually better protected than most, because if it actually becomes any kind of resort with any kind of people eating meals and staying in rooms, voila, the room and meals taxes kick in, and at least the state gets something back. But the nearest thing that this resembles is the old sports stadium complex that cities get themselves into, where they convince themselves they're going to get all sorts of jobs and revenue, and the city gets into putting up or co-signing the bonds for the expensive new stadium, and they never see their money back. It never is. It's a boondoggle. It's a gift to the developers, or it's a gift to the sports team, or in some cases, it's appeasing the sports team to prevent them from leaving, but they eventually leave anyway.
Right.
All right.
Right. No, exactly.
Hang on for 60 seconds, Kimberly. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Welcome back to GrokTALK, brought to you by the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers and the bloggers at GraniteGrok.com, one of whom is on the phone with us, Kimberly Morin. And we were talking about the balsams, and there's tons of things we could talk about, and I think we should, actually, because I just turn Mike's not even in the room when I turn his microphone on. When he's here, I forget to turn it on. Great. Right. So, Kimberly.
Yes.
All right. What else you want to talk about?
We can talk about whatever else you want.
I know. Well, I mean, what are you working on? What have you recently talked? I mean, we have Mark here. He's in the studio.
About that.
We can talk. We can start talking about that. Absolutely. The nice people of Derry elected some officials for the purpose of helping them deal with their tax burden, and they have attempted to do that. And as is so often the case, the inside powers that be, in this case unions and people connected to them, have objected.
That's fair to say.
That's fair to say. So, Kimberly wrote a great piece about it. I'm snipping again about it yesterday on Examiner, and of course Mark is here. So
hi,
how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Good. So you have the unenviable position of being on a town council in a town that has taxpayers who don't like their tax rate.
Yes, it's Derry on the municipal side and on the school side of budgeting has really kind of beaten the hell out of the taxpayer for at least 20 years, certainly 10. If you look back at what the tax rate was on the municipal side in 2004, it was $5.93 per thousand on a home. As of 2012, it was all the way up to $10.39 per thousand on a home. That's a huge increase. And people were very vocal, at least when I ran back in 2013, that the biggest issue on their mind was taxes. And I went to a lot of doors. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to mechanics. I talked to accountants. I talked to retirees. I talked to new homeowners. And you know what? They disagreed on all kinds of issues like bonds and abortion and gun rights. But you know what? They all agreed that the taxes needed to come down. And so in 2012, the tax rate was said to go up. It was going to go up about 9 cents. And we fought and kicked and screamed as a 4-3 majority to level fund the budget. Just level funding the budget and not increasing it every year was a victory. For years before, prior councils would claim victory for increasing taxes but not going past the tax cap. And my view of a tax cap has always been kind of a pock on our house. You know, if you're the kind of town that needed a tax cap in the first place, that tells me your spending was out of control. So to say that we didn't exceed the tax cap was nothing to be proud of.
The tax cap,
you're back, sorry.
The tax cap is there as a limit. If you go over it, you're breaking the law. It's
exactly.
It's not, oh, I'm proud that I didn't drive 100 miles an hour today.
Right. Yeah. So then in 2013, we were actually able to, or 2014, we were able to lower the tax rate by 15 cents, bringing the tax rate down. And now what we're trying to do is lower it. We set a goal, unanimously, by the way, but once the pressure kicks up, you lose that unanimity, by $2. We're trying to make sure that Derry is a competitive town. We're next to Salem. We're next to Londonderry. Businesses are going to these other towns. People would have you believe it's because, you know, they spend more on economic development and things like that. And what we've been saying is no, businesses will go where the tax burden is the least. And so we felt that if we're really going to be serious about economic development, let's approach a novel idea and try to lower our taxes. You know, if we want families to stay in Derry, let's lower our taxes. And so that's what we've been trying to do. I've never been shy about that for the last 2 years now. And what I will say is every time we have a budget session, you know, if you want to cut a lawnmower, if you want to cut and say, no, we don't need to buy a whole new fleet, or we don't need to lease a whole new fleet of police cruisers, you hear the same thing. No, that's going to compromise public safety. No, we need to have the best. No, if you don't buy the stuff this year, you're going to set us behind next year. And so you've always heard these typical bureaucratic budgetary arguments. And so this year, I think people really got antsy. They realized that you can't lower the tax rate without making some cuts to staffing, perhaps taking a second look as to how these collective bargaining contracts have been executed and negotiated for the last 20 years. And so what has happened is you've had a lot of people coming out, fear-mongering, saying that your town council wants you to die in your home. Your town council wants crime rates to run through the roof, and buildings are going to burn. And you've seen a lot of fear-mongering and hysteria.
Guys, they actually, firefighters put out, or I don't know who it was, one of the unions put out a petition on MoveOn.org that said, what's going to happen when you call 911? And no one's on the other end. Sorry, I mean, that's the kind of stuff they do. And people in Derry, they're not reading over the budget and looking at the union contracts. They have no idea the cushy deal that unions in that town have. So that's why I reported on it last week, to show people. And by the way, I've gotten feedback, and people are not happy. They're not happy. They're like, what? They get paid money if they don't take the health insurance? That's not normal. And that's costing Derry almost $500,000 a year.
Oh, absolutely. We have, and this was there before I got there. We've been trying to address it, but we have money that gets paid to employees for it's longevity pay. You have holiday pay. You have overtime. I was looking at the proposal right now for the most recent proposal of the budget. Police are asking for approximately almost $100,000 extra in their overtime, and the fire department is also asking for an extra $120,000 extra in overtime, up from what it was last year. And yet just last week we were being told we just need to save jobs. And we were being told what you really should do is cut the town's contribution to charities and things of that nature. No, we're going to need to cut roads and road funding in order to meet this $2 goal.
One of the things
because the roads are not done by union workers in Derry, is that correct?
Well, I don't know what the motive was.
Or shall we set one set of union workers against another for this? This should be fun.
Tell them, though, the overtime that Derry spends on just the fire department and police department alone is almost $1.5 million a year.
That's correct. And then we have people who have an annual wage and they're salaried, and they still get overtime. And I'm not talking the low man on the totem pole. We have, I'll break it down. We have 44 firefighters. All right, so 44 firefighters. We have 4 battalion chiefs. We have 4 captains. We have 12 lieutenants. So that means to manage 44 men, we have 20 supervisors. In the police department, we have 40 police officers, but we have 8 sergeants, 5 lieutenants, 2 captains. So that's 15 supervisors to manage 40 men and women. And guess what? All ranks get the overtime. One battalion chief last year, $20,000 in overtime. We're talking $10,000 in overtime. I have the figures in front of me. Same on the police side of it. Detectives making $19,000, $15,000 in overtime. And listen, nobody is saying that you can't make a good living in public service, but if that much overtime is being paid, you either look at the union contracts and say how union time is allotted, how overtime is allotted is a problem, or we're just not staffing people appropriately.
And maybe you're just not using the resources properly. Why do you have all this overtime? I've been in restaurant management. I work in a computer company now, and I'm like the whole department. I have to manage my time effectively to do 10 or 15 different jobs, and the jobs still need to get done, but I have to manage my time. And if it gets to a point where I can't do that, then I need some assistance, and then that's a different situation. But the thing that bugs me about the whole union, I was in a union for 10 years. I worked for UPS, so I'm a Teamster. I know people who are police officers who did their 25 years. They're in their late 40s, early 50s. They're collecting a really nice pension, and then they go out and get a job making that much or more. And I'm like, I don't have a problem with giving you a pension because you did this job and it's a dangerous job and you should be compensated for that. But I don't think you should be able to collect that until you're at least 65. Because, for 20 years, this guy's going to collect more money than I'm going to make working. Plus, he's going to work another job if he wants to, part-time maybe, security, and all of that, all those pension dollars are a huge burden on the towns in the state. And I don't think you should be paying viable workforce people to sit around. They're not sitting around. They can get another job. Why do they need their pension until they're older? It drives me crazy, and that's just one aspect. The overtime's a problem. I know they got the contracts and we made the deals, and maybe we need to honor those. But moving forward, it's unsustainable. At some point, people get fired, and that's what you guys are looking at. You're looking at the possibility that in order to do what the taxpayers want, you have to terminate employment.
And that's the one thing you don't want to do. So it's interesting, actually. We talk about these pensions. The only company I have worked for in the last 40 years...
I know you like it when I cut you off, but I'm missing my segment break.
Oh, okay, fine.
So we're going to continue this discussion with you. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Kimberly, you can stay online if you want. We'll be right back. This is GrokTALK.
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
"Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results."
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
There are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change.
Jean Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is the repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now at the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to GrokTALK.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio, microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
All right, we are back with Mark Osbourne, and of course Kimberly Morin's on the line with us. I'm Steve McDonald here with Mike Rogers. Marmar's here to supervise us again. I forgot to mention that. Remember, I said we needed a chaperone. Visit us at GraniteGrok.com. Please go to cnht.org to see what they do. Make a donation, help support what the space that we're using, that they donate. Kind of pretty much donate to us for free. We pay for the phone and the internet and stuff, but the rest of it's on them, and they could use the help. So let's continue the conversation. I had to interrupt Mike because I wasn't paying attention to the clock.
And Mike's always ready to go off on some rant or some tangent. The point I was making is these towns are stuck with these defined benefit plans and long-lived pensions, and not only that, but pensions and benefits that go on forever and ever, even after a relatively short working career. The only company I ever worked for that actually had a defined benefit plan went under, and that was Nortel. Mostly I've worked for small high-tech companies. I tend to get out when when the company becomes too bureaucratic, and they all have 401k programs or stock programs or something, but essentially it's a defined contribution program. And with those, the company can be or town can be as generous as it likes in matching contributions, meaning putting in more on top of what the employee puts in, but at the end of the day, it's a savings plan, and the employee can walk away with it. But when the employee walks away with it, still earning interest or still accumulating stock value, the town has no further liability. And that's really the key. The problem with defined benefit programs is they get generous, they get more generous and more generous over time, and they stay with the employee until their death. And some of these trades, they're considered to be somewhat hazardous, and they can retire at, say, 45 or whatever, and they got another 20 years of working life. They go off and be, as you say, a supervisor, a security guy, or even be a police commissioner in another town, and they can continue to build a second pension, and that town's going to be on the hook until they die. And, we don't have any anti-double-dipping laws. But what I do believe is that, in a 401k program, and better yet, a rollable or portable 401k program, a defined contribution program that says, hey, if you leave us, you take the money with you, including, assuming you've worked with us for a couple of years, all the money that we put in, but we're not liable any longer. And by the way, you go take another job, you can keep pouring money into that defined contribution program, and you could retire and live extremely well. But we're not on the hook after you leave. And that's key. And, the sticking point, of course, would be, well, what about the health benefits after they leave? And that would be something that would have to be negotiated. But the pensions,
Obamacare.
The pensions should not. Well, yeah, the unions fought for that until they were against it.
Until they realized it affected them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So my point is, unions should welcome a program as long as it's generous enough. But it's all present dollars. It's not future dollars that you're committing. The whole problem with towns buying peace it's essentially a very expensive form of appeasement. The whole problem with towns buying peace with the unions in exchange for very expensive future benefits is just like the federal government's debt. The current generation doesn't have to pay for them, but the town is stuck with them forever, or until it goes bankrupt, whichever comes first. And usually bankruptcy comes before forever.
Well, and I wanted to point out, too, that as par for the course with unions, they are ginning up their base. They're telling people all this, the sky's falling and all these bad things are going to happen. Do you know that they talked about, the town council talked about, because they won't compromise, they said, well, we could close this one certain fire department. And they, of course they flipped out and, oh my God, you're not going to get your services. That one fire department they want to close is 1.4 miles from the central fire department. There's 4 fire departments in Derry, and it's a town of only 33,000 people.
What you need to say to them is, well, maybe we could make do with a volunteer fire department, guys.
Well, I think that yeah, really.
Sorry, I'm a little evil, and I realize that.
Well, it comes down to look, we can't afford it. So what do you want to do? Do you want to negotiate the overtime, negotiate the pay and benefits, or do you want us to fire these people?
Yeah, and they always say we want it all and we want it forever. And the response has to be, do you want to get, say, 90% of something concrete, or do you want to get 100% of nothing, because eventually it will be nothing?
The town administrator had sent out a letter to all of the unions saying the council has set a goal to reduce taxes by $2. That's going to mean some staff reductions. Can we talk about concessions so that we can try to save as many jobs as we can? And almost every union basically wrote back and said no. One union was so expressed to say we absolutely refuse to meet with you. And one union had said, well, we're always happy to come to the negotiating table, but no concessions were presented.
Do you, I know you have a 4-3 majority, which means you could have the votes to make the budget cuts that you need to make. When, as you mentioned early on, there's always intimidation, and the unions are going to go full bore against anybody they think is weak.
Oh, and they're certainly trying to go against everybody. Right now they're going against the ones who they think are strong on actually making these reductions. Earlier this week, I went into an office and I saw this younger blonde girl sitting at her desk, and she looked at me and said, I woke up to you today. And I said, excuse me? She said, no, I woke up to you. I said, I'm pretty sure I would have remembered that. How do you mean? She said, I turned on my Facebook, and as I do every morning, she said, and I saw your picture and 2 of the other Derry Town Councilor photos. And the fire union had been good enough to put our information to be contacted and our photographs on their Facebook page, basically saying, contact these people night and day. And then, of course, you have all the likes and the comments. And what? They want to lower taxes. They don't care about safety. They're scumbags. Who's giving them money for their campaigns? Things like that. And so I think those photos are down now for whatever reason.
I have.
You have them. Yeah.
Oh.
Is David Lang living in Derry now? I mean, has he moved over from Londonderry? Because I know he's in charge of the firefighters in New Hampshire Union.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
So.
I know we're not. I mean, it's not a surprise. We're not the first councillors to whom this has happened when talking about lowering taxes. There were previous councillors in the past. One of whom is a county commissioner in Rockingham County now, Kevin Coyle. He was leaving the building one time, and a bunch of safety service-oriented folks yelled at him, Good luck calling 911 when you need us. Another counselor, Janet Fairbanks, they put her all over obscene media.
Is that an actual threat to say, you know what, if your house is burning down, we won't come?
Well, those particular counselors took that as a threat, and they said to the fire chief and the town administrator at the time, you know what, we don't know if this is a threat, but we're certainly happy to let the Attorney General or the federal government decide. And then that's when all that nonsense stopped with them. So this is not a new tactic. And I got to say, I've learned a lot about budgets and politics just through the last 3 weeks. I understand why we have a $19 trillion debt in Washington, D.C. I understand why taxes don't go down, because it's easy. It's easy to raise taxes a little bit and increase spending a little bit each year. But when you're taking on special interest groups and you're saying, you know what, yeah, it's nice to be generous, but it's always easy to be generous with other people's money, and that's the taxpayers' money. You take abuse when you're trying to lower taxes. I mean, that might be what the people want, but the people who are receiving that money, they pull out all the stops. We're just town councilors. We're part-time people, if you will. I mean, it doesn't feel like it, but it is. We go to work every day. We don't have time to get. We don't have the ability to get organizations and media responses and press releases. We're just trying to do the right thing.
Right, and you're learning for yourself the truth of the old saying that the special interests are concentrated and the opposition, of course, is diffuse. In other words, the people are diffuse. They want their taxes reduced, but the entities demanding the money and that the taxes not be reduced are concentrated, and they can apply pressure, and they do.
Yeah, they certainly do. Like I had said, when we initially had said, let's look at the $2.50 goal to reduce the taxes, 7 counselors. I mean, this isn't public. We knew what we were talking about. 7 counselors said, yes, let's look at that. And then the administrator came back and said, you know what, that might be too much too soon. Can you amend your goal? And unanimously, all 7 of us said, yes, we certainly can do that. Let's look at $2. And all 7 counselors said, yes, okay, let's make that the goal. And now we've got one counselor saying that they would never support that publicly, that individual saying it. We have another counselor who's saying to constituents by way of phone call, I would never support this cut. We have a new person who just got elected. To that person's credit, they weren't part of the initial poll, but he has said to the media just days after getting elected, I wouldn't support that. And so you've got at least 4 people who have said we're trying to stick to our goal. Because that's what the taxpayers asked us to do.
It is, and it's tough because of that.
So these are people saying they won't support the cut, or that they won't. Just make sure I got my negatives the right way round. So
yes.
4 council members have walked away from the intent to cut.
Well, 2 that were there, before the last election, have walked away.
Yeah.
Just said we're not going to support the $2 cut that we voted for before this pressure started cooking up. We have a new member who's just got elected and has said that he's not going to support a $2 cut. And
so
you have
3.
Yeah, 3 have just kind of
4 are in favor, 3 are
right.
afraid, which is really the word for it.
Yeah, and that's true. Afraid is what it is, and very afraid in some cases, because they are truly intimidated.
Well, they go to the town council meeting, and they come in a big number, and they're loud, and they're obnoxious. They're typical union behavior. And they're very intimidating to other regular people in the town. And I've talked to the people that would like these tax cuts and are sick of this, but they're afraid to speak out. And that's because of the history and how the unions behave.
Well, let me ask you this. Does the moderator of the meeting ever ask the police to remove any of these louts from the room and arrest them, as they would do if any of you citizens spoke for 2 seconds too long?
Well, what happened was we haven't had meetings like this in 2 years, but because what's on the table is on the table, you had 200 people packing the meeting room and all of town hall, and I was wondering, what are the fire regulations, and but for this purpose, I guess it's okay. So
the fire chief was there supervising, so the fire regulations don't count.
And so the chairperson, I had been chairman for the last year, and that was the meeting where you elect new officers, and we had decided, look, there's no dictatorships here. We passed the gavel. And so our chairperson had been chairman for about 15 minutes, and so we had initially decided that, this is still where citizens come to talk and to speak to their representatives. No one had said we should have police ready to remove people, because honestly, we never thought that it would be necessary, and I still don't think it is. But we had one individual who's a former counselor get up at the dais, and we told everyone, look, a lot of people are here to talk, so you're going to get 3 minutes, and let's move on to the next person. And this former counselor decided he was going to try to exceed his 3 minutes, looked around, looked for some support, some clapping from the audience, and when he went to go beyond his 3 minutes, I was still feeling that chairmanship duty to quell it, and I jumped in and said, look, your 3 minutes are up, time's up, sorry. And I was very vocal in doing it, vocal enough that it made the New Hampshire News. I'm not sure why, but anyway, so I think the next meeting is just we know what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
That mob group mentality to some degree.
And you have to tell them at some point the town will go broke if they continue to pile on benefits on top of benefits. That in any reasonable scenario, it's the lower ranks that get paid overtime, not the salaried supervisors. And if they want to preserve employment, let's have more people with less overtime, because you're paying 50% extra for those hours of overtime.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah,
it's a lot of money.
My point is, if they're paying what we used to call time and a half, if they're paying 50% more per hour for those overtime hours, at some point you say, let's hire 2 more people and pay a lot less overtime, and it'll actually cost us less.
Yeah, but they won't do that because the reason they're doing the overtime is to make more money.
Right.
Well, that makes sense. That's why I would work overtime.
Well, that's true, and it's like salesmen and bonuses, and when the bonuses dry up, they move on. Well, you could only be so blessed that some of these would move on.
Right. What surprised me was the narrative that followed that meeting. I mean, you've got 33,000 people who live in that town. Much of the populace has been talking about taxes for years, and because 200, I would say, many self-interested folks showed up who stand to not gain by these cuts, packed a room. Our local papers are saying, wow, this town council is blessed to have so many people saying, don't lower my taxes. And the town council should just basically cave and leave everything the same. And I just thought to myself, okay, I guess 200 people out of 33,000, the math doesn't add up for me.
And that's the number of union employees plus some family members or some agitators.
Why don't we run a poll on this? And the newspaper probably won't do it, but
Dairy News won't. Listen, Dairy News is owned by the corporate ownership of Dairy News is owned by unions.
Oh, so I was going to say let's outdo them, shall we? Why don't we put an online poll up on Granite Grok and then have the council advertise it and see what kind of support they get for lowering taxes versus raising it?
Yeah, you know what'll happen though? They'll get all, just like with the petition on MoveOn.org. They'll get, if anything is online, they'll send out a blast email to all their union members across the country and have them sign it. You know how that works. We already know their little game, which is one of the reasons I got involved with this, because I'm not a fan of public unions, especially when they try to bully people.
You've got 100 unions trying to hold 33,000 people hostage. 100 union people, whatever. Employees.
I'm just trying to think of creative ways this could be done. What if? How many of your taxpayers actually have their email addresses on file with the town?
Oh, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. I know they write us all the time, but I don't know.
If it's a good percentage, you know what? Write to them and see what response you get. See what percentage says raise my taxes.
These counselors ran for office on the idea of cutting taxes, and the voters picked them.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
And it is a hostage situation. It's a hostile environment.
Yeah.
These union people are holding the town hostage against ever cutting taxes again. Basically, that's the argument. We will never let you cut taxes. Forget it.
The argument is, don't cut, leave it the same. And the real complaint is, I can't believe this council is not spending more. We should be hiring more personnel is typically the argument that we've heard from our department heads for a long time. Our department heads still think that they're understaffed. And that's the argument they put forward. And again, if somebody had said to me when I was running, hey, Mark, you know what, we really want you to hire more people, or we want better roads, or we want something, then I would try to be responsive to that. But what I heard 2 years ago was, we need our taxes lowered because we can't afford to live here. And we have business owners who have said to me off to the side, I'll keep my business here, but as soon as my kids are out of school, I'm gone. And I hear that more often than not. And to not be responsive to that, then I shouldn't even be on the council. You know?
Well, it's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm presuming that especially the leaders here on the council were elected by large margins.
I'll tell you, I remember that I got 64% of the vote, and I had a contested election, and I was very clear about what I wanted to do. I know that one of the other fellows who's supporting this tax cut, he had a contested race that he won. So occasionally in Derry we have uncontested elections, but those of us who are trying to get this tax rate down, we had to campaign for it. We had to defeat an opponent, and we were very clear about what we would do.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, it sounds like a mandate to me.
Yeah,
let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Obviously, the four of you remaining need to stick together and really stick to the plan. I mean, the taxpayers want you to cut the tax rate. And you need to fight for that because, and then they are going to throw everything at you. I mean, we just blog, but you never know. I mean, on any given day, you could put something up, and then the whole world is against you, just all of a sudden for no reason. And you're like, oh, cool, I know what button to push now. You just learn how to. But in your situation, you have to live there. And you have to make sure that you look. I ran to cut the tax rate. People said cut the tax rate. We want to negotiate those situations.
Yeah, I've always kind of been raised that if you make a promise, you keep it, even if you take some flack for it.
Kimberly.
I was just going to say, what's funny is the unions are using social media, but the town council isn't. So, and you know my thoughts on social media. That's how stuff gets out there. And what's also funny is before, and I don't know if it happened exactly before my article came out, but there were 2 Facebook pages for dairy firefighters. 2. Now there's only 1. And they don't have that photos of the 3 counselors, saying that, they're doing this, and the other thing, although, like I said, I saved it. But because obviously, I'm on social media pretty much 24/7 other than when I'm sleeping.
Which you didn't do last night, right?
Except for last night, because I actually did something other than be on the computer, yes. But they're taking to social media, and that's where you can hit the people in the town who might... What if somebody does read only Dairy News? Then they're just totally getting one biased side. I read the editorial from Dairy News. It's loaded with no facts, and it's completely one-sided. And there's other news in the area, London Dairy News or Nutfield News, I think, that will explain the facts. But who's believing what when you have this huge social media, force out there? And like I said, I sent out my article, and when I talked to a person I know in Derry, they were on the firefighters, on the union side. After my article, they were not. It's all about getting the truth and the facts out there, because people don't know what's going on. They don't know the cushy benefits and deals that the unions are getting. And it's not, I don't blame the unions for wanting to fight for them, but there's got to be a point where taxpayers draw the line and say enough is enough.
And how much is there, I'm not 100% up on municipal law and the meeting rules and all that stuff. How much could you guys as counselors talk about the issue on social media?
I mean, there's certainly nothing to prohibit us from discussing it on social media.
Okay. So there is an opportunity there for folks to say, listen, this is our side of the argument. Taxpayers ask us to cut taxes. Here are the numbers. Anything that's public information, obviously. The overtime budget, things that make people go, wow, I'm paying that much, but why? Why am I paying $500,000 a year in overtime, whatever the number is? And yeah, I mean, Kimberly has the ability, being in the position that she's in as well as we do, to express these issues in ways that are a little bit more hyperbolic, perhaps, than the average town councilor might want to go. So, I mean, we do have that advantage, but Steve Coleman, I think it's Steve Coleman in Salem, he talks about what happens to the town council on social media all the time. I mean, every meeting he's talking about it on social media, so I think Kimberly makes a good point.
Yeah, I think so. And as I say, nobody's looking for starving policemen or destitute firemen or anything like that. The question is, do you really need this much overtime? And if you do, why don't we have more bodies at the base pay rate, for example, and less overtime? And we'll move the money. We'll shrink your overtime budget and give you some salaried people instead. And you figure out how to make this work. And while we're about it, let's give the chiefs a small pay increase and say they're not eligible for overtime because people above a certain pay grade shouldn't be.
I agree.
You're not the ones to do, on the ground, typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're in their office.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, let's treat everybody properly here, and I say let's also figure out how this defined benefit scheme gets transmuted into a defined contribution scheme, because ultimately that's the only thing that's going to prevent your town going bankrupt, if not next year, in 10 years or 15 years' time. Because this overhang is just going to be there. It's like going around with a ball and chain, except the ball keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And there's only one way to stop it.
Right, and that's always been our concern, is it's just not sustainable. The rate at which we're operating is not sustainable. And so that's why we've been talking about this for probably 3-4 months. We have never been shy about what we're trying to do. A couple of people who don't like what we're trying to do are trying to say, well, you're not being transparent about it.
I don't know. We get meeting minutes. It's all online, probably.
Yeah, everything is online. Yep.
You could certainly say, well, I ran on cutting taxes. Here I am, cutting taxes. Again,
I just want to tell you how bad it is in dairy. In 2007, the tax rate was $22.05 per $1,000. In 2013, it was $31.49 per every $1,000. There hasn't been a change in the number of people in the town that would even call for that much of an increase in taxes.
And that's a combination of the municipal side plus the school side. Mm-hmm. So that's correct.
So let me ask this question, Mark.
Yes.
You got about 2 minutes. So.
Are we already seeing the effect of retiree benefits? In other words, what percentage of your payouts to police and fire personnel are people already retired? In other words, you're paying for dead weight at this point, or is this still mostly current pay and benefits that we're talking about in the budget?
How do you mean? I'm sorry.
Okay, well, look, because
I think it's current pay and benefits.
Yeah, because it's a defined benefit.
We're going to run out of time.
Because it's a defined benefit program. Yeah, really quickly. Sure. That means that when they quit working, you're still paying. So, therefore, how much of your budget is paying for people that don't work there anymore?
I don't even know that number.
That would be a good question. And the way to pitch it to the unions is to say, in order to protect your future benefits, we need to move to a system where that money is escrowed, i.e. a defined contribution system.
Mm-hmm. It's always an option. They're not going to go for it, but
they never want to go for it. They want to soak the taxpayers until they are bled dry.
Right, and then when the entire pension system collapses and they don't have any money, it's too late then, right? They all riot, just like in Greece. Riots in dairy. No, I don't think we'll see that, but it is one of those things. Those unions are going to fight for it. That's what unions do. They're like, I don't want you to take that dues-paying guy away from me no matter what, and they're going to do anything to prevent it.
It's one thing to fight for it, but it's another thing to lie, not be honest with taxpayers, and be egregious in the false statements that you make that the taxpayers are going to lose out on any services. They are not.
Okay. Thank you, Kimberly. I'm going to let you go. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Happy Easter.
All right, Mark, thanks for coming in, spending some time with us, and we will close the show. Next week, we have Jody Underwood so far coming in, and somebody else I forget. We're going to talk about Croydon and a lot more. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, baby!
When asked whether she still supports Obamacare, Senator Jeanne Shaheen said,
Yes, I do continue to support the law. We're beginning to see some positive results.
How can Senator Shaheen say we're seeing positive results when 22,000 of our neighbors have already lost their health insurance? What's worse, the Boston Globe reports the state's only health insurance provider radically reduced the number of hospitals in their network, forcing some people to drive over an hour for lab work, even when there's a hospital within a few miles of their home. When pressed about lack of access, Shaheen said,
there are some hospitals that are not covered, unfortunately, and I certainly hope that's going to change.
Jean Shaheen promised us we could keep our doctors and our healthcare coverage. Now she hopes we can get to a local hospital? Call Senator Shaheen at 603-647-7500. Tell her we need more than hope. We need leadership. Paid for by Citizens for a Strong New Hampshire.
Senator Jean Shaheen said, if you like your current health plan, you can keep it. That's not true, Senator. 22,000 New Hampshire citizens have been kicked off their insurance plans. Hospitals in Rochester, Concord, and Portsmouth, they aren't allowed to provide care under the exchange. Senator, you were wrong in your comments. You should apologize for your misleading remarks. I'm calling Senator Shaheen at 750-3004 and telling her I want my doctor back. You should too.
Paid for by saberpack.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee.
All of the music on this program comes to us through Creative Commons licensing from Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com. The opinions expressed on this program are those of the speakers, not necessarily those of CNHT, GrokTALK.com, or anyone else for that matter.
GrokTALK.